Chapter 1042. After the battle at Feihong Pass was settled, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili set off for Glass City. Conquering the world depended on military might, but governing the world did not depend on military might. Even with young Master Qingchen overseeing the city, there were still many matters in Glass City that required Mo Xiaoyao's personal attention. Counting from the time they left Glass City for the northern region last year, it had been a full 10 months since they left Glass City. 10 months seemed long, but pacifying the northern region, expelling the northern tribes, defeating southern Chu and Xiling, all these things had happened in an astonishingly short amount of time. With so many military achievements, no matter who it was, it would be enough to last 3 lifetimes. But Mo Xiaoyao and Yili had only used 10 months. When everyone came back to their senses and looked back on these incomparably valiant military achievements, they could only sigh in amazement. 10 months seemed short, but it was also very long. It was long enough for 2 children, who had just turned a month old and did not even know how to turn over, to sit in the arms of an adult and look around curiously, learning to speak. When Yili saw the 2 babies in the arms of the 2 Su madams, she finally could not help but cry again. The 2 babies had just turned a month old when they had been placed in the care of the Su family. For almost a year, they had not even seen their parents. How could Yili not feel guilty? Fortunately, although it could be said that they had barely seen their parents, the 2 children were not shy with strangers. With a smile, first Madame Su placed the baby dressed in a small white brocade jacket with white fox fur in Yili's arms. She smiled and teased, "Lin, say mother, say mother." The baby opened his large black eyes and looked curiously at Yili. He only felt that the hug was soft and fragrant, with a very comfortable fragrance. It was different from the hug of his aunt and uncle who usually loved to hug him. But he liked it very much. The baby smiled widely at Yili and followed first Madame Su's call, "Mother." "Mother, Lin knows how to call people," Yili exclaimed in surprise. She raised her head to look at the other baby in the arms of Madame Su, who was wearing a pink robe. Second Madame Su smiled and said, "These 2 children are as smart as Xiaobao. Xan, call me mother." Little Xan, giggled at Yili, her sweet little face full of affection. It was obvious that she wasn't shy with strangers at all. She even reached out her small hands towards Yili and called out, "Nyang nyang, hug hug." Yili only felt her heart soften, as if something was slightly heating up. She carefully pulled little Xan, into her arms. Fortunately, the 2 children were almost 1 year old, so they could sit comfortably in Yili's arms. The 2 babies grew up together and had a good relationship. Not only did they not fight to be hugged, they even held each other's hands in Yili's arms and babbled to each other in words that no one else could understand. Mo Xiaoyao stood behind Yili, reaching out to support the baby in her arms from time to time. A faint smile appeared on his lips, washing away the killing intent that had just come from the battlefield. Mo Xiaobao stood by Yili's side and looked regretfully at the 2 babies in Yili's arms. He had already grown up and couldn't let his mother hug him anymore. At least, he couldn't let his younger brother and sister hug his mother. "Mother, Xiaobao missed you too." Mo Xiaobao looked at Yili with eager eyes. Yili smiled and said, "Mother missed you too. Did you listen to eldest uncle these days?" Thinking back to when Mo Xiaobao was sent back to Li City a few days ago, Mo Xiaobao's aggrieved look before leaving, Yili felt a wave of guilt in her heart. Although it was for his safety, Mo Xiaobao was an extremely smart child. At that time, even if no one told him, he definitely understood that the situation was very bad, so he didn't say anything and left with the guards. He must have been very worried these days. Mo Xiaobao nodded repeatedly. "Xiaobao is the most obedient. If you don't believe me, mother, you can ask eldest uncle." Mo Xiaobao grew more naughty as he grew older, but he was smart. If someone didn't have any ability, even if they were pranked by him, they wouldn't be able to find any evidence. In the entire Li city, only Su Qingchen could control him. You're obedient. Who was the one who made a fuss about going to Feihong Pass yesterday? Outside the door, Su Qingchen's voice carried a faint smile. Soon, the immortal young master dressed in snow-white clothes appeared in front of everyone. There was a kind of person who was born to be favored by the heavens. Even time seemed to have frozen on his body. If Mo Xiaoyao's unchanging handsomeness for so many years was because of his profound skills, then Su Qingchen was born to be favored by the heavens. Su Qingchen's youth didn't make people feel that he was immature. That handsome and otherworldly appearance and temperament made him seem as if he had the handsomeness of a youth and the steadiness of a middle-aged man, but it was different from the steadiness of a court official who worked hard all year round. There was another kind of carefreeness. Su Qingchen stepped into the hall and said with a smile, "In less than a year, you defeated 4 countries in a row. Such an unprecedented record, congratulations to Prince." Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "No, if it weren't for Brother Qingchen overseeing Li City, how could I be so relieved? Not to mention conquering the world." These words weren't empty words. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions must be prepared first. The importance of military supplies to a war was self-evident. In the past year, it was because of the Su family overseeing the northwest that the Maoist army never had to worry about military supplies and provisions. With this kind of logistical support, it was naturally much easier to win a war. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and wasn't modest at all. They were both smart people and could naturally tell which words were true and which were false. Moreover, with Yi Li's relationship with the Su family, it would be hypocritical and alienating if she continued to refuse to be modest like an outsider. Su Qingchen sat down. The 2 Sus knew that they were going to talk business and got up to leave. Yi Li had just returned and naturally couldn't bear to part with the 2 children, so the 2 children also stayed. The 2 babies sat in Yi Li's arms. Seeing the 2 grandmothers who had been taking care of them leave, they weren't in a hurry. This caused the second Su's wife to laugh and scold the 2 little ones for being heartless. Mo Xiaoyao took the cute little Exayan from Yi Li's arms and sat down next to Yi Li. She was wearing a pink brocade dress and a silver ankle bracelet. After leaving her mother's arms, little Exayan didn't cry because she also liked this white person very much. She curiously grabbed Mo Xiaoyao's long white hair and gently tugged on it. Mo Xiaoyao helplessly looked at his daughter. He raised his hand and took out a delicately carved jade bead the size of a pigeon's egg and stuffed it into her hand to play with. Exayan didn't dislike it and curiously played with the jade bead in her hand. Mo Xiaobao looked at his little brother in his mother's arms and his little sister in his father's arms. He pitifully moved to Su Qingchen's side. Su Qingchen smiled and shook her head. She pointed to the seat next to her. Mo Xiaobao then went to the seat next to Su Qingchen and sat down. The hall was quiet for a moment before Su Qingchen said, "Originally, you just came back and I shouldn't disturb you. However, there's something that I want the prince to see for himself." Su Qingchen took out a letter from her sleeve. Yi Li only needed a glance to know what it was. The bright yellow envelope had a drawing of a giant wolf bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. This was the letter of credence of the northern tribes. Chapter 1043. What's the matter with the northern tribes? Yi Li asked with a frown. Yi Li never had a good impression of the northern tribes, even if they had some form of cooperation with the crown prince of the northern tribes. Mo Xiaoyao held his daughter with one hand and used the other to take the letter. He frowned and said, "Use Princess Ronghua to exchange for the bodies of Yelu Yi and the northern tribe soldiers." Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a while before he looked up at Yi Li with some annoyance. Where are Yelu Ye's remains? Yili was speechless. She really did not remember where Yelu Ye's remains were. She was too busy at that time, and cleaning up the battlefield was not her responsibility. How could she remember such a thing? Mo Xiuya said with some dissatisfaction, since they want to exchange for Yelu Ye's remains, why did they only come now? It had been so long, who knew where they had hidden Yelu Ye's remains? Su Qingchen could not help but twitch his lips and said, the northern tribes are frozen in winter. It's just the beginning of spring and their envoys have already arrived in Li City. It's quite fast. Moreover, the northern tribes would definitely observe the situation. If the Mahist army lost to the Western Hill and the Chu states' allied forces, who would exchange with you? They would just send their army over to attack again. Mo Xiuyao nodded impatiently and said, fine, I understand. Tell them that they can exchange for Yelu Yi and the northern tribe soldiers. But Princess Ronghua is not enough. What else do you want? Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows. Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, that will depend on what young Master Qingchen can get them to take out. The more the better. The Prince Ding mansion was rich, but it could not withstand too many people. Which place did not need money? Su Qingchen nodded and said, I understand. But, can you find Yelu Ye's remains? With Mo Xiuyao's personality, he didn't need to think to know that Yelu Ye's final outcome would not be a peaceful burial. Mo Xiuyao looked at Su Qingchen as if she was an idiot. Were Yelu Ye's ashes made of gold or carved with words? This was the first time in his life that someone had questioned his intelligence. However, young Master Qingchen admitted defeat, so, are you going to use some random ash to fool me? Do you really intend to exchange Princess Ronghua back? Su Qingchen looked at Mo Xiuyao suspiciously. In her impression, Mo Xiuyao was not a kind person, unless there was something to gain from it. However, young Master Qingchen could not think of any other benefits that Mo Xiuyao could obtain from the northern tribes. Land was out of the question. Even if the northern tribes were willing to give it to them, they would only be left with boundless grasslands. Not many commoners were willing to stay there. For at least 8 months a year, they would have to endure the northern tribes' raids. Now that the Central Plains people had not even been dealt with, Mo Xiuyao would definitely not extend his hand to them at this time. Other than that, there seemed to be nothing that Mo Xiuyao would be interested in. Mo Xiuyao nodded. Of course. Didn't the northern tribes say that Princess Ronghua was Li's sworn sister? If Princess Ding's sworn sister was harmed by the northern tribes, wouldn't the Prince Ding mansion be the one to lose face? We all know that's not true. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows. The relationship between Yi Li and Princess Ronghua was not bad, but it was not to the point of becoming sworn sisters. Mo Xiuyao waved his hand. It doesn't matter. By the way, it's best to tell the northern tribes that I'm interested in their warhorses. What if they don't agree? The warhorses of the Central Plains were not as good as the northern tribes or even the western regions. Even if there were foreign warhorses, they would not be as good as before. The northern tribes and the Central Plains had been enemies for generations, and warhorses were strictly prohibited from entering the Central Plains through any channels. Although over the years, the Prince Ding mansion had secretly obtained some from various channels, the amount was pitifully small. It was no wonder that Mo Xiuyao was so generous this time. Don't agree. Mo Xiuyao sneered. Then I will go and get it myself. I understand. Su Qingchen nodded, indicating that she understood Mo Xiuyao's determination. With Su Qingchen's statement, Mo Xiuyao's expression immediately eased, and he put this matter aside. Since young Master Qingchen was willing to express his opinion, it meant that there was no problem. After talking about the northern tribes, Su Qingchen looked at Mo Xiuyao and raised her eyebrows. Also, these days, someone has been asking me about something. But I don't know how to answer, so I'll ask the prince for his opinion. What could possibly be a problem for young Master Qinchin? Mo Xiaoyao asked disapprovingly. Obviously, he thought that Su Qinchin was bored and wanted to find trouble with him. Su Qinchin played with the porcelain teacup in her hand, her handsome eyes staring at Mo Xiaoyao. A long time ago, someone asked me about Prince's plan, to ascend to the throne. Ascend to the throne. Mo Xiaoyao's hand, which was holding Xian's hand, paused. He frowned and said, "Who said that I plan to ascend to the throne?" Su Qinchin raised her eyebrows. No one said it, but obviously, there are people who think so. Does that include young Master Qinchin? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Su Qinchin smiled but did not speak. The answer was obvious. I don't plan to ascend to the throne. Mo Xiaoyao said seriously. If he wanted to be emperor, he would have done it long ago. Why drag it out for so many years? Su Qinchin sighed softly and frowned slightly. You should know the pros and cons of this. Young Master Qinchin looked at it purely from the point of view of ruling the world. Mo Xiaoyao was not lacking in anything, so it was inevitable that he would rule the world. But as long as he did not ascend to the throne, he would lack that name. This did not prevent Mo Xiaoyao from controlling the Prince Ding mansion and even all the territory that the Prince Ding mansion currently occupied. But it still made people feel uneasy. Moreover, because it was not an official imperial court, the ranks of the officials under the Prince Ding mansion were also disorderly. After so many years, young Master Qinchin was surprised that he did not make any mistakes in the chaos. Prince Ding, even if you have no intention of ascending to the throne, you should consider the feelings of those who follow you. So many people were loyal to the Prince Ding mansion because of loyalty, but it was definitely not just for loyalty. Although young Master Qinchin did not care about fame and power, he did not look down on those who valued power and worked hard for fame and fortune. Cultivate civil and martial arts skills and sell them to the imperial family. This was a deep-rooted concept in the hearts of the people for thousands of years. In the eyes of the people, only the imperial family was orthodox. Only by submitting to the imperial family was one's true birth. The Prince Ding mansion today was no longer the Prince Ding mansion of the past. Now, the Prince Ding mansion had not only the generals who had been loyal to the Prince Ding mansion for generations, but also more people and families who came to seek refuge. What? Young Master Qinchin also has this intention. How about I appoint you as the Prime Minister? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Su Qinchin with a smile. Su Qinchin lifted his eyes lightly. Thank you, but I can't accept it. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and gave him a slightly complacent look. So, if I ascended to the throne and appointed all the officials, everything would be on track. Wouldn't the Su family immediately resign and live in seclusion? Did they think I was a fool? Young Master Qinchin was equivalent to half of the people in the imperial court, not to mention the whole Su family. Chapter 1044. More importantly, what was the point of ascending the throne? When he became the emperor, he would go to court every morning and listen to the ministers quarreling over trivial matters. If he didn't go to court for a day, his ears would go numb from the censors. How good was it now? If there was something, he could deal with it. If there was nothing, he could do whatever he wanted. It wasn't as if he had to go to court every day as a prince, right? If Su Qinchin didn't understand what Mo Xiaoyao was thinking, then he would have lived for nothing. He ignored him and looked at Yili with a smile. What does Yili think? Yili teased the baby as she said with a smile, Big brother can just ask Xiaoyao about this kind of thing. Mo Xiaoyao looked proudly at Su Qinchin and said, Yili and I are husband and wife. Naturally, the husband sings the wife's tune. However, if Yili wants to be the empress, I don't mind ascending the throne. Yili frowned slightly. Of course she knew that Su Qingchen was saying this for their own good. After all, even if Su Qingchen didn't say it, someone else would soon bring it up. However, it wasn't that Yili hadn't thought about being the empress, but she really wasn't that enthusiastic. With her current situation, being the empress wouldn't be better for her. Instead, there would be more restrictions on her. These restrictions weren't given to her by Mo Xiaoyao or anyone else, but the restrictions of this generation. There's no need to think about it. I have already decided. Seeing Yili frown, Mo Xiaoyao directly decided, Yili, can we not be the empress? In the future, Mo Xiaobao can make you the empress dowager. Su Qingchen raised an eyebrow. Mo Xiaoyao saying this clearly indicated that the next successor of the Prince Ding mansion, and even the future master of the world, was definitely Mo Xiaobao. Looking at the two parties involved, Su Qingchen sighed softly and said, forget it, it's good that you know what you're doing. No matter what. The Su family will always support you. Yili gently nodded and said with a smile, Big brother, I know. She knew that the Su family had always stood behind her and supported her. Without the Su family, no matter how capable she was, it would be difficult for her to make so many people in the Prince Ding mansion submit to her. She was born in the Su family, which was a noble family, and the Su family's grandfather, uncle, and cousin, who were regarded as incomparably powerful by the world, had always been her strongest backing. Su Qingchen stood up and said to the two of them, even if we don't consider the matter of ascending the throne. Lin and Nexayan were about to turn a year old. I'm afraid we'll have to hold a big one this year. Regardless of whether it was to reward the three armies, or to gather information from various parties. Even if he didn't do it, those who were supposed to come would still come, but they would come uninvited. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, I understand. We'll do as you say. Su Qingchen went out. Mo Xiaobao knew that his father and mother had something to say, so he also slipped out in a flash. In the main hall, Yili looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a smile and said, Xiaoyao, you really don't plan on. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, I never planned on becoming the emperor. He stood up and carried the baby to Yili's side. He squeezed into a chair with Yili and sat down. Mo Xiaoyao teased his daughter as he smiled at Yili and said, we're living so well right now, why do we have so many things to worry about? We've already lived like this these past few years, I don't believe that we won't be able to live for another few years. When the time comes, I'll just leave it all to Mo Xiaobao to worry about. In any case, in these 2 years, the Su family's education had also begun to lean towards the path of the emperor. Wasn't this just the perfect time to become the emperor? He, Mo Xiaoyao, had never learned to be the emperor like this. Yili looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, you're not afraid that Xiaobao will hate you in the future? Mo Xiaoyao said righteously and sternly, I truly want to cultivate his abilities. If I have to do everything for him, then what's the point of having him? How could something that was ready-made be so easy to pick up? Most importantly, he had worked so hard for most of his life. How could he let Mo Xiaobao live peacefully as the Emperor of Peace? Yili sighed softly and said, I don't care about you. You can go tell those people yourself. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yili with a smile and said, I know. If I don't become the emperor, Li will also be happy. Isn't that right? Yili did not hide it. She generously nodded and admitted, if you don't become the emperor, I will indeed be very happy. Even though saying this was a bit unfair to those generals and subordinates who had risked their lives for the Prince Ding mansion. But Yili had to admit that Mo Xiaoyao was right. What was the emperor? The son of heaven, the son of the heavens, the ruler of the world. But in the end, it would not belong to any one person. Not to mention that when the time came, there would definitely be many people who would create things like the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. Yili did not want to fight with any other woman for Emo Xiaoyao. In the end, she was not a woman born and raised in this era. Emo Xiaoyao could only be all hers, or none of it could be all hers. There was no possibility of more or less of it being hers. Yili faintly smiled in her heart. She loved him. So, she was not willing to share it with others. Then isn't that good? Emo Xiaobao is already 9 years old. At most in a few years, the Prince Ding mansion will be given to him. At that time, whether they want to be the emperor or not, it will no longer be our problem. After so many years. I am also very tired. Li, you can't be so heartless as to make me wake up before the sun rises every day to attend morning court, right? Speaking of which, actually back then, I felt that the position of the emperor was simply not for humans. You get angry earlier than a chicken, you sleep later than a dog, you can't eat or do that. The woman you like may not be able to marry, and even if you marry, you may not like her. The slightest mistake will cause you to be scolded by the imperial censor, and you have to endure it to show that you are open-minded and magnanimous. Otherwise, the imperial censor will fiercely record you in the history books. Alright, the more you say, the more inappropriate it is. Yili did not know whether to laugh or cry, but she had to admit that Emo Xiaoyao's words were somewhat reasonable. More importantly, after hearing Emo Xiaoyao's words, her mood immediately relaxed a lot. It's good that you don't regret it. Then, Lilik should persevere together with I. We don't want to be the emperor and empress. When Emo Xiaoyao ascends the throne, we will be the retired emperor and empress dowager. Ah. Just as Emo Xiaoyao was happily speaking, his face suddenly stiffened. Yili looked at him strangely. What's wrong? Emo Xiaoyao stiffly held little Axayan, the little girl's black eyes innocently looking at her mother. His Highness Prince Ding's snow-white robes were stained with a large patch of water, and a lot of water had quietly slid down the hem of his robes. Chapter 1045. After returning to Li City, Yili put down the things in her hands and focused on taking care of the children. Although they left their parents not long after they were 1 month old, perhaps due to the nature of mother and child, the 2 babies became familiar with their mother in less than 2 days. That clingy appearance made it seem as if they had been by Yili's side since birth and had not left for a single day. Speaking of which, Yili was considered a soldier on the battlefield in both her previous and current lives. Especially soldiers who had been on the battlefield, it was inevitable that there would be a murderous aura around them. However, Yili was not like that. No matter how tragic the battle was on the battlefield, after the battlefield changed clothes, she was still a gentle beauty who came from a scholarly family. Even her eyebrows carried a faint warmth and gentleness. It was no wonder that the 2 children were so happy to see their mother. Children were always naturally close to things that were softer and warmer. In the main courtyard of the Prince Ding mansion, the spacious room was covered with a thick carpet from the western regions. All the furnishings in the room were polished and covered with cotton cloth. There were also various toys on the ground. The 2 babies were placed on the ground and allowed to play around. The babies who were only 11 months old had already started to learn to walk. Lin, who was born first, was already able to walk steadily on his own. Although Axayan was born earlier, his body was actually weaker than his younger brother. He preferred to sit on the ground and play. Seeing his younger brother walking around, he reached out his small hand to pull him. The floor was covered with a thick carpet. Lin was pulled to sit on the ground but did not cry in pain. He smiled happily at his sister. Yili also sat on the ground. Looking at the 2 babies giggling, a faint smile appeared on her lips. Princess Consort, second Madame Su and Madame Lang are here. Outside the door, a maid reported softly. Before they came in, Murongting's voice came from outside. Li, you seem to be very free. Yili looked up and saw Murongting, Qingjing, Hua Tianxiang, Mo Wuyo and Shen Yunj standing at the door. She couldn't help but smile. Why are you here? Come in quickly. Qingjing looked inside and covered her mouth with a smile. It's very lively outside. You seem to be very free. You should come out. It won't be easy for us to enter with so many people. It was very clean inside. Obviously, it was specially made for children. With so many people going in, wouldn't the snow-white carpet be dirtied? Although they were all women now, the group of women who had been educated since they were young, except for Murongting and Shen Yungu, none of them had the nerve to take off their shoes in front of outsiders. Yili smiled and picked up a baby in each hand, placing them in Qingjing and Murongting's hands before walking out. Murongting and Qingjing had both given birth to their own children before and were very familiar with the two babies in the past half a year. The two little fellows were not shy at all in their arms. Murongting hugged her pink and tender heart and said that she also wanted a daughter. Sisterly, ah no, it's Princess Consort. Yungu walked up to Yili and gently bowed. She was more obedient and quiet than when she was in Jiangnan. Yili pulled her and said with a smile, just call me sisterly, look at them, who is polite to me? Is Yungu used to living in Li City? Shen Yungu nodded and said, the two aunts Su are very good to me. Sister Tianxiang, Sister Zhang, Sister Ting, and Wuyo are also very good to me. And Yungu has a foster father. Foster father. Yili raised her eyebrows. Mo Wuyo pursed his lips and said with a smile, it's my master. Didn't master tell Princess Consort when he went to Feihong Pass? Master said that Yungu is much more talented in medicine than me and likes her very much. He took Yungu as his foster daughter. Yili raised her eyebrows. She remembered that Shenyang and Yunji's father seemed to be related, but this seniority. Then she thought about it. Shenyang and Yungu probably only had each other left in this world. What relationship in this world was closer than a father and daughter? Since Shenyang made this decision, he must have his reasons, so she didn't think too much about it. Shen Yungu nodded repeatedly and said, yes, foster father's medical skills are very good, even better than my father's. Foster father said that as long as I study hard, I will be as good as him in the future. Perhaps it was because of her family background, Yungu was born with a unique talent and interest in medicine. Speaking of which, her eyebrows couldn't help but add a bit of brilliance. As long as you're happy. Yili smiled and said. Then she looked at the girls in front of her and said, when we were eating last night, eldest aunt and second aunt told me that now that things are finally peaceful, they are anxious to arrange the marriage of third brother and fourth brother. Qingjing nodded and said, Li is right. Mother and eldest aunt are really anxious. Third brother just had to go to war, and fourth brother is far away in Xiling. Mother also said that this time, no matter what, we have to let third brother get married first. Hua Tianxiang was so embarrassed that her face turned red. She glared fiercely at Qingjing, you are usually the most gentle and elegant, why are you also so? Murongting rolled her eyes and said, just be happy. We won't laugh at you. Yesterday, the third young master of the Su family rushed to give you something as soon as he came back. Do you think we didn't see it? After saying that, she glanced at an exquisite and elegant pearl hairpin on Hua Tianxiang's head, her face full of kindness and ridicule. Mo Wuyo, who was also about to become a bride-to-be, carefully hid in a corner so as not to be caught in the crossfire with Hua Tianxiang. It was not that she didn't have sisterly feelings, but she couldn't resist Sister Murong's sharp tongue. On the contrary, Shen Yungu, who was clear-minded, looked happy. Is Sister Tianxiang getting married? Yunj will definitely give you a good gift. Mu Rongting chuckled and looked at Shin Yungu. Yunj, you're not planning to give me pills again, are you? Shin Yungu blinked. What's wrong? Yili was also very puzzled. What's wrong? Shin Yunji's pharmaceutical skills could be said to be better than her master. The pills she made were naturally not ordinary. Qin Jing covered her mouth and laughed. Last New Year, Yunj gave each of us a bottle of pills. Last October, Uncle's birthday was also a bottle of pills. This year, on eldest brother's birthday, it was also a bottle of pills. In addition, eldest brother received the most pills in our family. Now, eldest brother's face stiffens when he sees the pills. The people next to them also look like they wanted to laugh. Yili was amused and couldn't help but laugh. She was really curious about how young Master Qingchen looked when he was frightened by a small bottle of pills. Shin Yungu pouted and looked at the crowd blankly. What's wrong with her giving them pills? She gave the two Aunt Sue's pills to maintain their health, gave Sister Jing pills to maintain their beauty, and gave the two uncles and Su Qingchen pills to maintain their health. It turned out that the Su family saw this little girl's naivety. Moreover, she sincerely made the pills herself, so they were embarrassed to talk to her about the importance of giving gifts. However, the Su family didn't care about these empty gifts. A sincere gift was always more precious than a hypocritical one, wasn't it? However, young Master Qingchen suffered. Miss Yungu believed that Su Qingchen was seriously injured and left behind an illness. Whenever Su Qingchen had a headache or fever, the little girl would stuff a pile of various pills into his hand. Now, the Su family didn't even go to the doctor to get medicine when they were sick. They could just ask Su Qingchen for it. Anyway, Miss Yunji's medicine was always much more effective than the medicine prescribed by ordinary doctors. Chapter 1046. Yili smiled and rubbed her head. It's nothing. Yunji's medicine is very good. Your medical skills must have improved a lot these days. Yunji's eyes lit up. Sisterly, you've also used my medicine. Yili nodded. Mr. Shen brought some from Feihong Pass. The effect is very good. Yungu said proudly, that's good. I will definitely become the most famous doctor in the world in the future. Then, just like my adoptive father when he was young, I will practice medicine to help the world and save many, many people. Practice medicine to help the world. It was a great dream. Yili raised her eyebrows and smiled. What did Big Brother say? Shin Yungu blinked blankly and said, Su Qingchen. What did he want to say? Oh, he said that I will definitely become a very powerful doctor. Looking at the calm and happy little girl in front of her, Yili couldn't help but cover her face and sigh. Sure enough, she thought too much. She didn't expect that the marriage of the elegant immortal young master had become a big problem in everyone's heart. Even she couldn't help but want to pull him together with other girls. Since Su Qingchen didn't have any thoughts, Yili nodded calmly and smiled. Big Brother is right. Yungu will definitely become a female doctor. Mu Rongting rolled her eyes at Yili and said, what's right? Yungu is 1 year older than Wio, right? A girl at this age should consider marrying into a good family, not whether to become a female doctor. Yili looked sideways at Qin Jing. Qin Jing held Lin and lowered her head to laugh. Yili smiled in her heart. She turned her eyes and gave Wio a look. Wio immediately understood and pulled Yungu out to play. Seeing the two little girls go out hand in hand, Yili smiled and said, Wio and Yungu have a good relationship. Hua Tianqiang smiled and said, isn't that so? Both of them have good tempers, and they usually study medicine together with Mr. Shin. It's only been a few days, and outsiders don't think that Wuyo and I are cousins. The two of them are more like sisters. About Yunj. Yili frowned and did not know what to say. Murong-ting smiled and said, "The first madam of the Su family is very satisfied with Yunj as the eldest daughter-in-law of the Su family. However, one of the two parties involved is really stupid, and the other pretends to be crazy. The first madam of the Su family doesn't dare to tell the little girl directly, for fear of scaring her. However, that young Master Qingqin didn't say anything. I heard that he made Lady Su very angry." Yili thought for a moment and said, "Perhaps. Big brother really doesn't have that intention." Murong-ting rolled her eyes. "If you don't mean that, then don't hold her up. She's Mr. Shen's adopted daughter, the future female miracle doctor. Many people are eagerly waiting to propose marriage to her." Murong-ting's words were not a joke. Yungo was beautiful, her martial arts were high, and her personality was cheerful and pure. This kind of personality might not be good in the noble families, but it was the favorite of the generals who had been on the battlefield. Many generals in the Mahist army wanted to marry such a daughter-in-law for their sons, and many young generals in the Mahist army admired such a beautiful and cheerful girl. Needless to say, Yunji's medical skills were highly praised by Shenyang. Even if she had no appearance and no family background, there were still countless people waiting to propose marriage to her with betrothal gifts. Unfortunately, this beautiful and adorable little girl always had a handsome and otherworldly young master in snow-white robes by her side from time to time. Countless pursuers had been defeated before they had time to make a move. This was also why Murong-ting disliked Su Qingqin the most. If he was interested in the girl, he should be more direct. If he was not interested, he should stay away and not hinder other people's pursuit. He could not bully the girl just because she lived in the mountains since she was a child and did not know much about the ways of the world. After all, Yunji's age was really not young. Except for Hua Tianxiang, who was forced to marry because of the situation, the girls in this world were not married at the age of 15 or 16. Zheng what does Big Brother mean? Qin Zheng covered her mouth and smiled. Li don't ask me, I rarely see Big Brother. But I always feel that Big Brother should be different to Yungu. After all, young Master Qingqin had been so busy in the past 6 months that even Madame Su could not find him most of the time, but he still had time to accompany Yungu to go out for a stroll. It did not seem like he had no intention at all. However, young Master Qingqin's thoughts were not something ordinary people like them could guess. Seeing the three people gossiping about young Master Qingqin, Hua Tianxiang did not care about her shyness and said with a smile, "If young Master Qingqin is really interested in Yungu, I'm afraid young Master Qingqin will be in big trouble." "What do you mean?" the three people asked curiously. In this world, there were not many people who could make young Master Qingqin feel big trouble. It was no wonder that the three of them were so curious. Hua Tianxiang smiled and said, "Yungu grew up in the mountains since she was a child. Her temperament is as simple as a child's. If an ordinary girl has young Master Qingqin accompanying her often, even if she is not wild with joy, she should at least be flattered. But you see Yunji's little face every time." Murong-ting and Qin Zheng looked at each other and could not help but laugh. They did not know why, but young Master Qingqin looked very kind, but Yungu seemed to be really afraid of Su Qingqin. In front of young Master Qingqin, she did not look like a little girl who had just awakened to love, but like a stupid student standing in front of the teacher who had done something wrong. If Su Qingqin really had something to do with Yungu, then young Master Qingqin's love life would not be easy. Yili took Lin from Qin Zheng's arms, who stretched out his small hand to her, and said with a smile, "Forget it, I will ask Big Brother about this later. As for third brother and fourth brother's marriage, what do eldest aunt and second aunt think?" Qin Zheng smiled and said, Mother and eldest aunt think that third brother and fourth brother's marriage will be held together in August this year. We have also discussed it with Mrs. Yang, and Mrs. Yang has no objection. Yili smiled and said, That's good, it seems that our family has a lot of happy events this year. At that time, Tian Xiang and Wu will directly get married from the Prince Ding mansion. Hua Tianxiang's delicate face was crimson, and she glared at Yili and said, We heard that Lin, and Xan, are going to have a first birthday banquet, so we came to see if there is anything we can help with. Why are you making fun of me? Yili sighed softly and said with a faint smile, These things will be taken care of by others. Tian Xiang, you should be at ease as a bride. These years, you have been wronged. Speaking of which, they married into the Prince Ding mansion early, and Qin Zheng and Mu Rongting also married one after another. Now, even Mo Xiaobao was almost 10 years old, but Hua Tianxiang's marriage had been delayed until now. She was 26 or 27 years old, which was not considered old in the previous life, but in this generation, a 20-year-old girl who was not married was already called an old girl who could not get married. The pressure Hua Tianxiang was under could be imagined. Hua Tianxiang's beautiful eyes were slightly red, and she whispered, What nonsense, I am fine. In history, it wasn't that there were no examples of emperors and empresses being deeply in love with each other. However, once they ascended the throne, which emperor didn't have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards? Qin Zheng looked at Yili with some worry. Yili smiled faintly and said, Don't worry, Xiuyao will take care of these problems. Mu Rongting was a little worried and said, Prince Ding. It wasn't that she didn't believe in Prince Ding's character. Mu Rongting was very envious of how Prince Ding and Li had been together for so many years. However, the position of emperor often meant that there were countless unavoidable choices. Yili said softly, I believe in him. No matter what happens, we will stand together and face it. Seeing that Yili was so calm, Mu Rongting also relaxed and nodded heavily, No matter what, we will support you. Thank you. Yili smiled. Nyang nyang. The little princess in Mu Rongting's arms wriggled her small body and reached out her small hand to Yili. Yili had no choice but to hand Lin, to Qin Zheng and take Xan, into her arms. She smiled and said, Xan, what's wrong? Mu Rongting looked at Xan, sitting in Yili's arms with a big smile on her tender little face. She couldn't help but say sourly, Aunt Su is right, you really have no conscience. Before your mother came back, Aunt Murong played with you every day. Now that your mother is back, she doesn't want me anymore. Aunt. Nyang nyang. The little princess smiled even more happily in Yili's arms, completely not understanding Mu Rongting's complaints. Hua Tianxiang held Lin, and teased him while thoughtfully saying, Lin, Prince Ding is not willing to ascend the throne because of this, right? It had to be said that Hua Tianxiang, who was born in a meritorious family, had a clearer understanding of many things than Qin Zheng and Mu Rongting. Yili was startled and said with a smile, he said he doesn't want to attend court. Everyone was speechless. What kind of reason was this? Reporting to Princess, young Master Qin Chen invites Princess to the study. Outside the door, a guard hurriedly reported. Hearing this, Yili raised her eyebrows. She immediately heard the difference. Mo Xiuyao was also in the study at this time. Why was it not Prince Qin Chen who invited her, but young Master Qin Chen? What happened? The guard looked at Yili awkwardly and said, Prince Qin Chen is furious in the study. Young Master Qin Chen invites Princess to take a look. I know, you can go. Yili sighed. She stood up and called Xan into Qin Zheng's arms and said with a smile, I'll be back soon. The little princess babbled and grabbed Yili's hair and refused to let go. Yili helplessly frowned, shook her head and said with a smile, "Forget it, I'll take you with me. Xin are also Mrs. Imperial Father, right? Leave Xin to me." Qin Jing said. Although she had never seen Prince Ding get angry, she had heard of it. She didn't want to scare the child. Moreover, Qin Jing had a rough idea of why Prince Ding got angry. She said softly, "Don't mind what others say." Yili nodded and said, "Don't worry, nothing will happen." After a while, she finally persuaded the little princess to let go. Yili went in and changed her clothes before walking in the direction of the study. Chapter 1048. Seeing Yili go out, Hua Tianxiang and the other two looked at each other worriedly and sighed helplessly. Every family has its own difficulties. Even for a couple like Yili and Imo Xiuyao, who could be said to be the most powerful couple in the world, there were also times when they had no other choice. Murong-Ting sighed and said, "Fortunately, Lang Er doesn't have much ability, and no one forced him to marry a wife or take a concubine. As for those blind people who wanted to send themselves to her door, she naturally had a way to deal with them. But a situation like the Prince Ding mansion couldn't be solved by driving those people out like she did." Qin Jing also sighed faintly. Murong-Ting paused and looked at Hua Tianxiang and said, "Prince Ding is still unwilling to ascend the throne. Is it really because of this?" Hua Tianxiang glanced at her and said, "Even if it's not all, it should be a little bit. But, it's fine if you only hear these words here, but you must not speak of them outside, including Lang Haoyu." Murong-Ting rolled her eyes at him. "Of course I know, do you think I'm an idiot? These people are really annoying. When the Prince Ding mansion was in dire straits, why didn't they rush to marry their daughters to Prince Ding? Now that Prince Ding has the world in his hands, they come over, talking about etiquette and clan rules. They even secretly squeezed the Su family and wanted to monopolize power, really." Qin Jing patted the back of her hand with a smile and said, "Okay, I'm not angry. What are you angry for? Since Lear knows what to do, we can't help much. Let's just watch." Murong-Ting smiled and said, "Who said we can't help much? This girl has at least persuaded a few girls not to marry Prince Ding." Hua Tianxiang raised her eyebrows. "You have such eloquence." Prince Ding was now the future emperor. Not to mention that Murong-Ting's eloquence wasn't very good. Even if she was, she might not be able to persuade those girls who wanted to be the emperor's concubine. Murong-Ting snorted and said, "They must have lost their minds and forgotten what kind of person Prince Ding is. Prince Ding was not someone who would not kill women. I told them about the fate of the women who adored Prince Ding, and several of them expressed on the spot that they didn't want to be concubines." Qin Jing did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Ting, do you think they can decide whether to marry Prince Ding or not? What's the use of scaring them?" Murong-Ting was stunned and lowered her head in dejection. Wasn't that the case? How many things in this world could be decided by a woman? Women who wanted to marry Prince Ding as concubines naturally yearned for glory and wealth, but even if they didn't want to marry, what could they do? At the end of the day, they didn't have a choice whether to marry or not. Yili stood outside the study and did not enter immediately. Before she entered the study, she heard Imo Xiuyao's voice. When Imo Xiuyao was truly angry, he was very calm, but this kind of calmness was often accompanied by shocking bloodshed. Perhaps it was because of this reason that Su Qingchen had secretly sent people to invite her over. After all, the war had just been settled, and the world was not truly at peace. Su Qingchen also did not wish for news of Prince Ding killing meritorious officials to spread at this time. Although young Master Qingchen did not think that many of these people had any merit. "What's wrong with not ascending the throne? Don't you want to live?" These few years, the Northwest has been without an emperor, and I don't see anyone who can't live. Mo Xiaoyao said lightly. A country cannot live without a ruler for a day. If that's the case, what do I need you for? Prince. Clearly, there were still people who did not give up and wanted to continue persuading him. Yili saw that if she did not enter, Mo Xiaoyao would really explode. Only then did she push open the door to the study and slowly walk in. Prince, what's wrong? I haven't even walked in and I can already hear you getting angry. Mo Xiaoyao glared at Su Qingchen unhappily. Su Qingchen smiled but did not say anything. Li, why are you here? Mo Xiaoyao walked down from his seat and reached out to take Yili's hand. Yili smiled faintly and said, I thought of some things that I wanted to discuss with Prince, so I came over. Did I come at a bad time? Mo Xiaoyao pulled her forward and said, It's nothing, sit down and talk. If there's nothing else, all of you can leave. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao pull Yili to the main seat and sit down, the people below could not help but frown, and some even showed some dissatisfaction. As for the trusted aides of the Prince Ding mansion, they quickly lowered their heads, wishing that they could dig a hole and bury themselves in it. They grumbled in their hearts, if you want to die, at least wait until we're gone. Prince, your subjects are discussing matters with Prince. A gray-haired old man came forward and said in a low voice. Yili glanced at him. He looked familiar, but not too familiar. She remembered that he was from a prestigious family in Dechu State, and could be considered an old subject of two dynasties. When the northern tribes invaded, he came to the Prince Ding mansion to seek refuge because it was closer to the northwest. However, he had not done much, so it was natural that Yili did not know his name. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at him unhappily and said, Discussion. I have been sitting here listening to your nonsense since early in the morning. Do you think I have nothing better to do? If you have any problems in the future, come and tell I after the results are out. The old man was almost choked by Mo Xiaoyao's words. How is the coronation ceremony nonsense? In the eyes of the old man, who had studied all his life and considered himself a scholar, was there anything more important than becoming the ruler of a country? To the side, a few of the trusted aides of the Prince Ding mansion looked at the old man sympathetically, and consciously leaned back to avoid being implicated if the prince got angry. To Prince Ding, the coronation ceremony was not a big deal. If he wanted to be the emperor, Prince Ding would have ascended a few years ago. Mo Xiaoyao said impatiently, Who told you there was a coronation ceremony? 2 years ago, you were crying and shouting that you were loyal subjects of the Dechu state. What? The Dechu state has not been destroyed yet, and you're in a hurry to succeed the emperor. You want the coronation ceremony, right? Coincidentally, there is a coronation ceremony in Jiangnan. I will send someone to send you there. Who knows, you might even make it in time for a drink. Prince. Prince. These words, in the ears of the former officials of the Dechu state, could be said to be heart-wrenching. However, Mo Xiaoyao was in a fit of anger at this time. He did not care about their changing expressions. He laughed coldly and said, You want to send your daughters into the Prince Ding mansion. Fine. I's beloved concubines still lack a few servant girls to serve tea, wash their feet, and fold their blankets. If it really doesn't work, they can do the laundry and cleaning in the manor. It will save the Prince Ding mansion the money to buy more servant girls. But the prince, having 3 wives and 4 concubines, has been common since ancient times. In the past, the prince was busy with many things and did not have time to care about these things. However, now that the world is at peace, if the prince's manor only has 1 princess consort, it would lose face for the Prince Ding mansion. This time, the one who spoke was an official of the former Great Chu. He used to be a high-ranking official of the Minister of High Affairs. However, his attitude was always ambiguous. He did not offend either the Prince Ding mansion or Mo Jingqi. Later, when the Dechu state moved south, he brought his family to the northwest. It could be said that he had made the right choice. I am very impressed. These simple words made the faces of the few old gentlemen, who were speaking righteously just a moment ago, turn red. These people were not the trusted subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion. Naturally, they did not know Prince Ding's character. He was just relying on his reputation and seniority to flaunt his seniority. Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand. He stared at the crowd and said coldly, "What Wang Fei wants to do, it is not up to you to interfere. I want you to remember, whatever Wang Fei says, whatever she does, it is I's idea. If you dare to disobey, don't blame I for being merciless." In the large study, everyone felt their scalps go cold. They hurriedly said, "This subordinate obeys." After dismissing the crowd, Mo Xiaoyao's anger had not dissipated. He glared at Su Qingchen with displeasure. Young Master Qingchen elegantly drank his tea and said lightly, "What are you glaring at me for? If you don't call Li over, do you really want to kill a few people to establish your authority?" Mo Xiaoyao snorted, "You think I don't dare? Those old men only knew how to talk nonsense all day. They could not do anything proper. They only knew how to cause trouble for him. He really didn't know why he took in these people in the first place. He would rather use these people to exchange for a few commoners who knew how to farm and work." Su Qingchen smiled leisurely, "These people are useless. Sometimes, they are quite annoying. But it just so happens that we cannot do without them. Prince, it is true that these people are old and rotten. But each one of them can be said to have students all over the world. They are so old that they have become shrewd. If they really cause trouble, the effect will not be inferior to that of an army of thousands. The pen in the hands of a scholar was much more troublesome than the sword in the hands of an enemy. Of course, if Mo Xiaoyao wanted to be a tyrant who burned books and buried scholars, then he did not need to care." Yili sat beside Mo Xiaoyao. She frowned slightly and said, "Is it to persuade Xiaoyao to ascend the throne as soon as possible?" Su Qingchen looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a smile that was not a smile. She said jokingly, "If it is only about ascending the throne, why would it stop here? Those old officials have nothing better to do. They even thought of setting up a harem for the new emperor. They were just about to present the imperial concubine selection to the Wang Fei. If the new emperor ascends the throne, if there is only one Wang Fei, wouldn't it look bad? At that time, they can confer the title of imperial concubine together. Look, even the ranks are listed. Under the empress, there should be 2 imperial concubines, for imperial concubines, Zhao Yi, Zhao Rong, etc." Su Qingchen ignored Mo Xiaoyao's murderous gaze. She smiled and handed the booklet in her hand to Yili. The reason why Mo Xiaoyao was so furious was because those people thought they were clever and wanted to directly send the booklet to Yili. However, Mo Xiaoyao was one step ahead and intercepted it. Yili took it and flipped through it. It really did write several pages. Yili smiled and shook her head. She looked at Su Qingchen and frowned. Did someone go to Su family to disturb eldest aunt and second aunt these days? Su Qingchen looked gently at Yili and said, "These are all small matters. Those madams came to visit, we can't just ignore them. They don't dare to be impudent in front of mother and second aunt." Yili frowned and said, "I'm afraid that after a few more days, they will go and disturb grandfather." Su Qingchen didn't care and said lightly, "Grandfather is already so old. How can he not be able to see through these things? Lear, father, second uncle, and I have the intention of supporting you. No matter what you do, the Su family will support you." Yili nodded and said softly, "I understand, Dage." Su Qingchen stood up and said, "Now it seems that not ascending the throne was the right thing to do. We haven't even ascended the throne yet, but many people are already impatient. Moreover, things had happened too quickly this time. There might be someone behind this. It's time to clean up the subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion. As a father, don't be too lazy and throw everything to your son. Your son will still need many years to deal with these big matters." The last sentence was naturally for Mo Xiuyao to hear. Mo Xiuyao said with a sour expression, "I know. If they dare to casually stretch out their hands in front of I will break their limbs." Su Qingchen left, leaving only Mo Xiuyao and Yili in the study. Yili smiled faintly and pulled down Mo Xiuyao's handsome face. She said, "Are you still angry?" Mo Xiuyao laughed coldly and said, "If they really want to be emperor, I don't mind showing them what a tyrant is." "I don't want my husband to become a notorious tyrant," Yili said with a smile. Mo Xiuyao pulled her into his arms and said with a smile, "If I become a tyrant, how about Yili become a demon empress?" Yili leaned into Mo Xiuyao's arms and couldn't help but twitch her lips. As a soldier who had sacrificed her life for the country in the new era, being a demon empress was too much of a challenge to her worldview. Although they said that, they both understood that neither of them could truly act willfully without thinking of the consequences. Mo Xiuyao was very cruel to his enemies and never showed any mercy. However, he had always been very soft-hearted towards his own people. However, the old man's entire life was devoted to educating the students. How could he truly see through the world of mortals and be detached from the world? Su Zhou also sighed and slowly put down a piece. He said, "Other things aside, Prince Ding's delay in ascending the throne and taking in concubines is detrimental to the stability of the world. Ascending the throne to become the emperor, appointing an empress, taking in concubines, and having children. Not only did this represent the beginning of a dynasty, it also gave the people of the world a stable message, calming the hearts of the people. Prince Ding's personality is too similar to the founding Prince Ding back then. Back then, the first Prince Ding of the Dechu state, Mo Lanyun, had not insisted on marrying the princess of the previous dynasty. Otherwise, the founding ancestor of the Dechu state might not have been able to sit on the throne. And now, there wasn't even a chance for the events of the past to repeat. In today's world, other than Prince Ding, no one else could sit on the throne, and no one would be able to convince the masses. "Elder Su, should we go and persuade Prince Ding?" Su Zhe hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. Although they were far away from the city, they still knew about the big and small matters in Glass City. It wasn't a good thing for the ruler and his subjects to be at odds with each other before the country was even established. Mr. Qing Yun waved his hand and smiled. "No need, they know what to do. Right now, it just looks a little messy. Those who truly know their position are all very astute. It's better for it to be messy now than to leave these problems to be passed down from generation to generation." Su Zhou was startled. He said, "Isn't this too risky? Since the beginning of the world, the most important thing was to seek peace. That was why so many emperors had wantonly conferred titles when they first established the country. In the end, they had to spend a lot of effort to get rid of the problems. How could the wise founding emperors not know these questions? It was just a sentence that was forced by the situation. It was too risky to start removing the subjects before the world was settled. If they weren't careful, there would be chaos again." Mr. Qing Yun smiled. "We're old. It's inevitable that we have to be overcautious in everything we do. Since Prince Ding has this courage, why not take a look?" Su Zhe smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Even you, as his grandfather, aren't worried. What do I have to worry about? However, I'm afraid that those old scholars will come to you soon. These people didn't have any ability, but they had a good reputation. They didn't have big hearts, but their tempers weren't small. After being rejected by Prince Ding and Princess Ding, it would be strange if they still came to find Mr. Qingyun. "Sir, there are a few old gentlemen outside asking to see you. They say that they are old friends of Mr. Qingyun and Elder Su." A boy servant walked into the bamboo forest and reported respectfully. The two looked at each other and smiled. Suja smiled. "They really come when they say they want to." Mr. Qingyun casually tossed the chess piece in his hand and smiled. "Most of them can't be avoided. I haven't seen them for many years. It's good to see them." These people had come to visit several times when they first arrived at West Hill. However, they were all rejected by Mr. Qingyun for various reasons. Therefore, it could be said that he hadn't seen these people for many years. With Mr. Qingyun's age, status, and reputation, no one dared to be unhappy if he didn't want to see them. However, this time, these people probably wouldn't stop until they saw him. Mr. Qingyun wasn't really afraid of them. He was just old and didn't want to deal with these people with ulterior motives. "Go, invite them in." "Yes." Chapter 1051. Greetings, Mr. Qingyun. Although these old scholars were very dignified outside, they still unconsciously lowered their heads in front of Mr. Qingyun. Although Mr. Qingyun looked like an amiable old immortal with his white beard and white hair, these people were all old. Naturally, they knew more about Mr. Qingyun than the average young man. Some of them were even Mr. Qingyun's disciples. Mr. Qingyun smiled and said, "Don't be so polite. You are all busy people. How can you have time to come to my mountain?" They didn't dare. They respected and admired Mr. Qingyun in front of them, but at the same time, there was a trace of envy in their hearts. If there was anyone with the best fortune in the world, Mr. Qingyun could be counted as one of them. Not to mention that his children and grandchildren were all successful. Young Master Qingchen was famous in the world when he was young. The fourth son of the Su family was a governor before he reached the age of 25. Even the third son of the Su family, who gave up literature and joined the army, had made outstanding contributions in the Mahist army. More importantly, he had a granddaughter who became Princess Ding. With these, the Su family could easily prosper for another 100 years. Mr. Qingyun was naturally very free. He didn't have to be so careful and calculate for the prosperity of the family like them. Mr. Qingyun ordered the servant to serve tea. Everyone sat down on the stone bench in the bamboo forest and drank tea. They were silent for a while. After drinking tea for a while, seeing Mr. Qingyun sitting leisurely without any change in his expression, someone finally couldn't sit still. "Mr. Qingyun, we came to disturb you today because we have something to ask of you." One of them stood up and smiled respectfully. Mr. Qingyun raised his eyes and looked at the person who spoke. His old eyes were unexpectedly calm and clear. He smiled faintly and said, "You are Zhao Zhifang. You studied in Lishan Academy. Speaking of which, we haven't seen each other for more than 20 years, right?" The man who spoke was almost 60 years old. Hearing Mr. Qingyun's words, he quickly smiled and said, "Mr. Qingyun is right. I was taught by Mr. Qingyun." Master Qingyun had also become famous at a young age. Although he was less than 20 years older than him, when he was studying at Lishan Academy, Master Qingyun was already a great scholar. Although he wasn't Master Qingyun's inner disciple, according to the rules, he still had to act as Master Qingyun's disciple. However, this made Zhao Zhifang, who had thought highly of himself for most of his life, feel a little embarrassed. Mr. Qingyun did not mind. He smiled and said, "What do you want to say?" Zhao Zhifang hurriedly said, Now that His Highness Prince Ding has pacified the world, it is time for him to ascend the throne and proclaim himself as the emperor to pacify the people. Appointing an empress, taking in a concubine, re-establishing the imperial court, ordering all matters to return to their proper positions, and all officials to their proper duties, so as to calm the hearts of the common people. But yesterday, we sent a memorial to His Highness Prince Ding. Prince Ding was furious and resolutely refused to take a concubine. We are thinking if Mr. Qingyun should persuade Princess Ding. This Princess Ding has done great service to the Prince Ding mansion. When His Highness Prince Ding ascends the throne, the Wang Fei will naturally be the empress. But if the Wang Fei is determined to monopolize His Highness Prince Ding, I'm afraid this will damage the reputation of the Wang Fei and the Su family. Mr. Qingyun thought for a moment and then raised his head to ask with a smile, "Is this what all of you think?" Everyone looked at each other and said in unison, "Mr. Qingyun, please put the world first. The Su family is the role model of all scholars in the world. They will handle this matter appropriately." Mr. Qingyun looked at the people in front of him and shook his head regretfully. These people were not young anymore. Some of them were only a few years younger than him. Were they so obsessed with fame that they were blinded by it? Everyone has been in Glass City for a long time. What do you think of the governance of the Northwest? Mr. Qingyun asked leisurely. This Prince Ding is truly a wise ruler. The people of the Northwest live and work in peace. It is truly a prosperous era. Mr. Qingyun shook his head and said with a smile, "It is a bit exaggerated to say that it is a prosperous era. But it is true that people live and work in peace. In these 10 years, Prince Ding has not declared himself emperor. The people of the Northwest live and work in peace. It can be seen that, whether he is emperor or not is not directly related to the stability of the world. But, if Prince Ding does not declare himself emperor, it is not legitimate." Someone said anxiously. Mr. Qingyun said with a smile, "It is true that a country cannot do without a ruler. Prince Ding has the heart to conquer the world. He will not leave the world without a ruler. Now that Prince Ding is not willing to declare himself emperor, it is naturally not time yet. Why are you all so anxious?" Everyone looked at Mr. Qingyun with faint disappointment in their eyes. They originally thought that the Su family was willing to let Prince Ding ascend the throne as soon as possible. After all, after Prince Ding ascended the throne, the biggest contributor would definitely be the Su family. As long as Prince Ding ascended the throne, things would naturally be easy to handle in the future. But they did not expect that Mr. Qingyun really did not care. One of them stood up and said, "Mr. Qingyun is right. We should not say much about when Prince Ding will become emperor. What does Prince Ding taking a concubine have to do with them?" Su Zhe, who was sitting next to him, shook his head and said with a smile, "Fifth young master is a smart person, how could he not know? How is this just a matter of taking a concubine? More importantly, once Prince Ding ascended the throne and married a concubine, these people would become relatives of the emperor. If they gave birth to a son or a daughter, they would naturally be noble beyond words. They really aren't afraid of death." Su Qingyan muttered in a low voice. With Prince Ding's sinister personality, would he really allow himself to be manipulated by these old pedants who thought themselves infallible? Birds die in pursuit of food and men die in pursuit of wealth. It has been like this since ancient times. Su Zhe said with a smile. As expected, before the old men who went to visit Mr. Qingyun could sit down in the city, they heard Prince Ding's decree from the Prince Ding mansion. Prince Ding ordered young Master Qingchen to be the right prime minister, and Zhang Qilan, Lu Jingxian, Yuan Pei, and Ling Huai to be the great generals. It wasn't strange that all the generals under the command of the Mahist army would be rewarded. More importantly, all the important positions of the third rank and above were occupied by young people under the age of 40. For example, Feng Xiao, Leng Haoyu, and Han Mingxi were all in high positions without exception. Even Princess Ding's shadow guard, Qin Feng, was given the title of Commander Qi Lin of the Maoist army. At the same time, he was given the title of General Ming Lai. He was on the same level as Murong Shen and the other generals who led hundreds of thousands of troops. Xue Jing, Lin Han, and Wei Lin were also given official positions. They were placed in the Ministry of Revenue, Ministry of Justice, and Ministry of Appointments. As for He Su, who had outstanding military achievements, he was naturally given the title of Great General. Prince Ding's sudden move made countless people dumbfounded. Most of those so-called highly respected and aged elders of famous clans only had a high and mighty title. However, in the face of Prince Ding's punishment, everyone was speechless. Because the two members of the Su family, Su Hongyu and Su Hongyan, also had empty titles like them. The Su family had worked hard for the Prince Ding mansion these years. This time, Prince Ding and Princess Ding were out on an expedition at the same time and such a big thing happened. If it weren't for the Su family, how could the Northwest not be in chaos? Since they didn't express their dissatisfaction, these raised idlers didn't have the face to say that they were dissatisfied. But Prince Ding's attitude made all the aristocratic families anxious. The people Prince Ding put in important positions were all old and trusted subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion and the Maoist army. He was even willing to use the princess consort's guards instead of using them, the descendants of the prestigious families. This was obviously a warning from Prince Ding. What's more, in the past few years, the Northwest's imperial examination system had gradually matured. These aristocratic families' chances of directly entering the imperial court were greatly reduced. No matter what aristocratic family they were, if no one spoke in the imperial court, they would only end up in decline. How could they not be better? Everyone had yet to regain their senses when the orders from Prince Ding's residence came one after another, causing these old men to feel dizzy and disoriented. The first to bear the brunt was a strange edict issued by Prince Ding. That was, from now on, except for the Di-Phase family, the families of concubines, and concubines were not allowed to become officials in the imperial court for 3 generations. This edict was permanent and could not be disobeyed. As soon as this order was issued, the patriarchs of the aristocratic families who wanted to send their daughters into the Prince Ding mansion immediately vomited blood. Not allowed to become officials for 3 generations. What did this mean? This meant that your enemies would drag you into the mud and never be able to rise again. More importantly, this decree was still in effect. In other words, from now on, those who wanted to rely on nepotism to rise up the ranks could give up on the idea. If this news was only a warning to them, then the last order was clearly telling them that Prince Ding's intentions could not be disobeyed. The last order was that from now on, the Prince Ding mansion would no longer continue the aristocratic preferential treatment system of the Dechu state. All officials had to pass the imperial examination or be personally examined by Prince Ding's princess. Most importantly, the scholars who participated in the imperial examination had to serve at least 1 year of military service. The aristocratic families who had previously disapproved of the Northwest's so-called compulsory military service system were instantly shocked. Not only would their disciples not be able to become officials in the imperial court, they would not even have the right to participate in the imperial examination through the normal channels. In a short time, the number of people who came to the Su Fu increased. Inside the Prince Ding mansion, Su Hongyu, Su Qingchen, and the others were all present. Mo Xiuya pulled Yili to sit at the head of the table and lazily looked at the crowd. He was clearly in a good mood. 2 days ago, he had been angered by those old scholars, but he could not casually kill them. However, that was fine. If Mo Xiuya wanted to punish someone, he had plenty of ways to make them wish they were dead. Therefore, Prince Ding did not care that the bombs he had dropped had blown up the aristocratic families of the world. He only sat in the Wang Fu and pulled Yili along to watch the show, laughing to himself. Chapter 1053. Su Hongyu looked at him and shook his head. Prince, do you really intend to exterminate all these aristocratic families? Sometimes, these arrogant aristocratic families were very annoying, but sometimes, they couldn't be left out. Moreover, if they were pushed too far, these people might all defect to Jiangnan. When that happened, it would not be good for the Prince Ding mansion's reputation. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows. Since they claim to be loyal to I, they have to follow I's rules. Could it be that they want this prince to accommodate them? As long as they know their limits, I will naturally give them a way out. As for those who are originally wavering, I do not care. These 2 days, I have caused a lot of trouble for Mr. Hongyu. Mr. Qingyun was far away in the Lishan Academy, and it was not easy to see him. However, Su Hongyu was in Glass City. As the current head of the Su family, he was naturally the first person that the other family heads wanted to win over. Su Hongyu shook his head, indicating that he did not need to care. Su Qingchen was now the right chief minister, second only to one person. Su Qingbai was also a high official of a region. Su Qingze and Su Qingfeng also held important positions. The Su family was already in the limelight, and the older generation naturally did not need to be entangled in these matters. They only needed to pave the way for the younger generation. Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiaoyao, asking, Prince has left the position of left chief minister. Who is he planning to use it to bait? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and smiled. With a sincere expression, he said, I am not baiting anyone. The position of left chief minister has already been chosen. It is just that the person will not take the position. Mr. Shouting? Su Qingchen asked. Regardless of status, ability, or reputation, Mr. Shouting was no doubt a suitable candidate. The fact that he used to be from West Hill might be criticized, but it would undoubtedly make it easier for him to win over the hearts of the people of West Hill. After all, 1/3 of the Prince Ding Mansion's territory was seized from West Hill. Having a famous scholar from West Hill as the Prime Minister would have a great effect on the people's loyalty. Mr. Shouting agreed. Su Qingchen asked. But others don't know yet. Others might not know, but there would be many people eyeing the position of left Prime Minister covetously. Su Qingchen would never believe that Mo Xiaoyao did not intend to make a fuss about this. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, Of course I agree. However, Mr. Shouting is busy with the affairs in the northwest. It will take at least 2 to 3 months before he can come to Glass City to take up his post. As for what happens during this period, it's none of I's business. Everyone present couldn't help but twitch their lips. Anyone who wanted to play tricks under Prince Ding's nose must have forgotten to burn incense in their previous life. Seeing everyone's expressions, Mo Xiaoyao didn't mind at all. He waved his hand and said, Let's not worry about these trivial matters for now. After this, they should be quiet for a few days. Let's talk about Lin Er and Axan Er's first birthday banquet first. Everyone's expressions became serious. Su Qingze said calmly, The invitations have been sent out. The northern tribes, Dechu State, West Hill, Nanzhao, and the kingdoms of the western region have all been invited. The post house is also preparing for it. The envoys of the northern tribes were in Glass City now. As for the rest, he should be here in half a month. However, when the time comes. Glass City's safety. Su Qingze frowned. Although the world situation had been settled, it was because of this that it was more dangerous. Whether it was the northern tribes, West Hill, or Dechu State, there were many people who wanted Mo Xiaoyao's life in the dark. Mo Xiuyao thought for a while and said, when the time comes, I will deploy troops to guard the vicinity of Glass City. Also, Qingfeng's subordinate Qi Lin can also be stationed in Glass City temporarily in case of emergency. Yili nodded in agreement. Mo Xiuyao asked curiously, who will come from West Hill? Su Qingchen said leisurely, if I'm not wrong, it should be Ladingfeng. Ladingfeng? Mo Xiuyao frowned. He did not take Ladingfeng seriously. However, if Ladingfeng came personally, it meant that the situation in West Hill was still stable. Su Qingchen nodded and said, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Ladingfeng and the Emperor of Xiling did not fight. Once the news of Lei Jinting's death spread, the Emperor of Xiling ordered Ladingfeng to succeed the position of Genom of Gojoseon. The Emperor of Xiling does not have a son. If everything goes well, Ladingfeng will be the next Emperor of West Hill. Whether it was the Emperor of Xiling or Ladingfeng, they were not as stupid as they thought. Therefore, their hopes of benefiting from the conflict would be dashed. Mo Xiuyao did not mind. He waved his hand and smiled, it's fine. If Ladingfeng is finished so quickly, I will be disappointed. Lei Jinting's death should allow him to grow. This time, I want to see how far he can grow. Su Qingchen nodded and said, Ladingfeng should be here to negotiate with the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Xiuyao lowered his eyebrows and thought for a while. He said, let Murong-shen and Marquis Nan continue to fight. If they don't fight to the original border between West Hill and the Dechu state, there is no need to negotiate. Su Qingchen pondered for a moment and said, if Ladingfeng wants to settle down and recuperate, he may take the initiative to retreat. That's the best. Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, no matter how he wants to negotiate, the Xiling army must retreat to the original border with the Dechu state. Su Qingchen nodded and agreed with Mo Xiuyao's point of view. He frowned and said, the envoy of the northern tribes wants to talk to you personally. Mo Xiuyao looked at Yili blankly and asked, who is the envoy of the northern tribes? Master Qingchen was speechless. Mo Xiuyao had been back for almost half a month. How could he not know who the envoy of the northern tribes was? Even if the northern tribes and the Mahist army had just fought a war, the envoy of the northern tribes was still a country's envoy. As Prince Ding, even if he wanted to pretend, he had to pretend to be a gentleman. Yelu Hong. Chapter 1054. In the end, Mo Xiuyao did not summon the envoy from the northern tribes and threw the matter to Yili. It had to be said that Mo Xiuyao was sometimes so headstrong that it gave people a headache. On this side, the elders of the prestigious families were discussing the matter of the princess consort interfering in politics. On the other side, he openly handed the matter of negotiating with the northern tribes over to the princess consort to handle. This was equivalent to slapping the faces of these old men who thought that they could interfere with Prince Ding's actions without any hesitation. However, the elders who had just been slapped mercilessly by Prince Ding did not dare to say anything before they came up with a countermeasure. They could only pretend that they did not see anything and hide in their homes to sulk. Greetings to Princess Ding. In the Northern Tribes Inn, Yelu Hong greeted Yili calmly. He was not angry because Mo Xiuyao did not receive him personally. Not to mention Princess Ding's position in the Mahist army, just the fact that the northern tribes were the defeated party meant that they did not have the right to raise any objections. Northern Tribes Crown Prince greets you. Yili could not help but sigh at Yelu Hong's good temperament. Even at this stage, he could still be so polite. Of course, at the same time, she also had to sigh at the influence of political power on people's hearts. Even the northern tribes people who were known to be the most upright and outspoken had learned to beat around the bush. Yili sat down and did not beat around the bush with Yelu Hong. She asked, did Princess Ronghua come with the crown prince? Yellow Hong did not expect Yi Li's first question to be about Princess Ronghua. He paused for a moment before nodding. To be honest, Ronghua did come with me to Li City. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and smiled. The king of the northern tribes really trusts the crown prince. The king of the northern tribes used Princess Ronghua as a bargaining chip in the negotiations with the Mahist army. But before the negotiations could take place, he asked Yellow Hong to bring her back. It was hard to tell if the king of the northern tribes truly wanted to take back the ashes of Yellow Yi and the soldiers of the northern tribes or if he was just joking. Yellow Hong smiled bitterly. This one has made a military order with father, that I must bring back the remains of seventh brother and the northern tribe's soldiers. Please grant my wish, princess consort. As for Ronghua, please take care of him. Yi Li took a deep look at Yellow Hong and said, the crown prince has deep feelings for Princess Ronghua. I have not let the princess down after all these years in the northern tribes. Yellow Hong sighed softly. This one is incompetent. This one has made a fool of himself in front of princess. I will ask Ronghua to come out and meet the princess. Yellow Hong turned around and ordered the attendant beside him. After a while, Princess Ronghua came out from the back hall. Princess Ronghua, who had changed into the clothes of the Central Plains, looked a little haggard and pale. Compared with the last time they met, she was less beautiful and more weak and haggard. Your Highness, Princess Ronghua bowed and said softly. Yi Li raised her hand to support her and said with a smile, Princess, you don't have to be so courteous. Please sit down. The three people sat down again. Yi Li looked at Yellow Hong and said, the prince has handed over the negotiations with the northern tribes to me. I presume that a few days ago, young Master Qin Chen has already mentioned the conditions of my Prince Ding mansion to the Crown Prince. What does Crown Prince Yi Li think? Yellow Hong frowned. The war horses are the foundation of the northern tribes. The Prince Ding mansion wants 10,000 war horses at once. Forgive I for being blunt, but it is really difficult. With my power, I am afraid I can't agree. The negotiation was not something that could be done overnight. Yi Li did not care and said with a smile, Crown Prince Yelu does not need to rush to answer me. Anyway, the Crown Prince will stay in Li City for a while. It is better for the Crown Prince to think about it and discuss it with the king of the northern tribes. What does the Crown Prince think? Yellow Hong nodded and said with a smile, Thank you, Your Highness, for your understanding. Regardless of whether this matter is successful or not, Princess Ronghua will return to the Dechu state. Please take care of her. This is the sincerity of the northern tribes. Princess Ronghua's expression was indifferent. She lowered her eyes and sat quietly. It was as if Yellow Hong and Yi Li were not talking about her. Yi Li glanced at Princess Ronghua and sighed softly. If the princess stays in Li City, the Prince Ding mansion will naturally treat you as a princess. If the princess misses her family, I can also send someone to send the princess to Jiangnan. With Princess Ronghua's status as a princess, no one would dare to treat her badly whether she stayed in Li City or went to Nanjing. Princess Ronghua smiled faintly and said with a wry smile, Jiangnan, where is my family? Ronghua wants to go back to Changxing to serve Aunt Zhaoyang. Please grant my wish, Your Highness. When the imperial court of the Dechu state moved south, Princess Xiaoran also went south, but Zhaoyang princess stayed in the Chu capital. After that, the Mahist army took back the Chu capital and renamed it Changxing. Great Elder Princess Fuxi died of illness, and Zhaoyang princess had been staying in Changxing to observe mourning for Great Elder Princess. Princess Xiaoran died of illness soon after going south. Now, Zhaoyang princess was the closest relative of Princess Ronghua. Yi Li nodded and said, Well, in a few days, Zhaoyang princess will also come to Li City. At that time, the princess can return to Changxing with Zhaoyang princess. Princess Ronghua nodded gratefully and said, Thank you, Your Highness. After that, she lowered her head and no longer looked at Yelu Hong. Yelu Hong glanced at Princess Ronghua. His expression changed slightly, but he did not say anything. They had been husband and wife for 10 years. How could there be no feelings at all? What was more, Princess Ronghua was an extremely beautiful and intelligent woman, completely different from the ordinary women of the northern tribes. But no matter what, Princess Ronghua was definitely not as important as the throne of the northern tribes. After today's departure, they might never see each other again. When Yili left the northern tribes' embassy, she brought Princess Ronghua back. Since Yelu Hong had already brought Princess Ronghua to Li City, no matter whether the negotiation was successful or not, he naturally did not think that he could bring her back. In this case, it did not matter when Princess Ronghua would be returned to the Prince Ding mansion. He simply generously let Yili take her away directly. After returning to the Prince Ding mansion and settling Princess Ronghua down, Yili looked at Princess Ronghua's gloomy look and just sighed secretly. She did not try to comfort her. In the future, regardless of the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Dechu state and the northern tribes, Princess Ronghua was destined not to return to the northern tribes. Princess Ronghua was also a smart person. Naturally, she understood that the current situation was very good for her. Yelu Hong treated her with some affection. At this moment, she was probably still worried about her children in the northern tribes. But whether it was the Prince Ding mansion or the Dechu state far away in Jiangnan, they could not and had no obligation to bring back the children for her. Today, the people of the Central Plains hated the northern tribes more than the northern tribes hated the people of the Central Plains. Even if the children really returned to the Dechu state, it would not be a good thing. After a few days of negotiation with Yelu Hong, who had insisted on not giving in, finally relented and agreed to exchange 10,000 northern tribes' warhorses for the remains of Yelu Yi and the soldiers who died in the Dechu state. For this result, Yili was not surprised. This time, the northern tribes were defeated by the Mahist army. It could be said that the national strength of the northern tribes was greatly reduced. The northern tribes were sparsely populated and barren. If they wanted to return to their heyday, it would take at least a decade or two. And this was assuming that the Mahist army would not take the initiative to attack and give them a chance to rest. 10,000 warhorses in exchange for a temporary peace and a chance to breathe. It may not be a good thing for the northern tribes in the long run, but now the northern tribes had no other choice. Chapter 1055. When the two sides signed the peace agreement, Mo Xiaoyao finally showed up personally. However, Yili and Su Qingchen's names were still signed on the document. Su Qingchen was now the right prime minister and naturally had the right to represent Prince Ding in signing the agreement. However, Yili's appearance as a woman made the northern tribes' emissaries feel uneasy. It wasn't that they looked down on Yili, but they also understood the rules and traditions of the Central Plains. In formal situations, women had no right to speak. Thus, they couldn't help but doubt the effectiveness of this peace agreement. Faced with the northern tribe's suspicions and the dissatisfied gazes of the aristocratic officials, Yili didn't care and simply signed her name on the agreement. After both sides signed the agreement, Mo Xiaoyao stood up and pulled Yili to Yelu Hong with a smile. "Crown Prince Yelu, since you and I have signed the agreement, I hope to see the 10,000 northern tribes' horses as soon as possible." Hearing this, Yelu Hong's mouth twitched. It was said that people of the Central Plains like to beat around the bush and make others dizzy. However, Yelu Hong found that being too direct was also unbearable. Mo Xiaoyao's words meant to Yelu Hong, "If it wasn't for the 10,000 horses, why would I be in the mood to sign a peace agreement with you? Prince Ding, don't worry. As long as the Mahist army abides by the agreement, within 3 months, the 10,000 horses will be sent to the Central Plains." Yelu Hong said. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows. I will naturally keep my word. 10,000 horses. Within 10 years, neither side will be able to start a war. Yellow Hong nodded. In the future, the northern tribes and the Prince Ding mansion will be allies. This crown prince will toast the prince and princess. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was indifferent and he didn't object. That was how it was between countries. There were no eternal friends or eternal enemies. There were only eternal benefits. Although it was said that both sides were on good terms, both sides knew that neither the northern tribes nor the Prince Ding mansion had the strength to fight another battle. However, the northern tribes was in a worse state than the Prince Ding mansion. If the Prince Ding mansion tried their best, they could still fight another round. However, the losses would outweigh the gains. If the northern tribes were to continue fighting, it would be a disaster. Therefore, the northern tribes had to pay a higher price. If one day one of the two sides recovered and wanted to make a move, the so-called peace agreement would be nothing more than a piece of paper. When the envoys from Xiling and Dechu State arrived at Glass City, the Prince Ding mansion had just signed the agreement with the northern tribes. Upon hearing this news, the expressions of the envoys from the two countries turned ugly. With the ceasefire between the Prince Ding mansion and the northern tribes, it was very likely that they would turn their attention to the south. Regardless of whether it was the Dechu State or Xiling, they would not be able to withstand the attacks of the Mahist army. Everyone had to face an ironclad fact. After so many years of open and covert struggles, the final victor was obviously Prince Ding's residence. Reporting to the prince's consort, the envoys from Dechu State and Xiling have come to visit. When they heard this news, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili were sitting in the courtyard, playing with the two babies. The two babies had been handed over to the Su family not long after they were born. Yili had always felt guilty about this. Ever since they returned, whenever they had time, Yili would drag Mo Xiaoyao to accompany the two babies. From time to time, Mo Xiaobao would also come to join in the fun. Mo Xiaoyao was very fond of the little princess who was already as exquisite as a snow jade, so he followed Yili to play with the two babies every day. The two of them had become the most leisurely people in the bustling Glass City. Why did they come together? Yili raised her eyebrows and asked. Mo Xiaoyao did not mind and said indifferently, the distance between the two sides is about the same. It's not a big deal to arrive together. Who came from Jiangnan? The guard reporting to the prince, it's King Yu from Dechu State who came with the new Emperor Chu. King Yu. Mo Jingyu. Mo Xiaoyao did not have much of an impression of these princes from the Dechu State's royal family. When he was young, he might have been familiar with them, but when he grew up, especially after the incident at the Prince Ding mansion, he did not have much interaction with these people. Therefore, he did not have a deep impression of this Mo Jingyu who could be considered to have made a name for himself. Yili got up and placed Lin, who had already fallen asleep in her hands, back onto the small bed. She said, since Xiling Genom of Gojoseon and Emperor Chu have personally come, we should go out and meet them. So as to avoid being rude. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. He carefully put down the little princess and followed Yili out to meet the guests. In the main hall of the Prince Ding mansion, the two groups of people were divided into two sides. The new little emperor of Dechu State, Mo Suiyun, was only 12 years old this year. He sat at the forefront of the Dechu State side. Although he was wearing the luxurious dragon robe of the Ming Emperor, his expression showed that he was somewhat weak and panicked. From time to time, he would look at Mo Jingyu, who was sitting below him. On the other side, Lei Tingfeng was wearing the Xiling Genom of Gojoseon's court robes. He looked dignified and graceful. Compared to his previous irritation and panic, he was more composed and calm. The Xiling officials sitting below him all lowered their eyes solemnly, as if they were following Genom of Gojoseon's lead. They looked more magnanimous than the Dechu State. Prince Ding Mansion has arrived. princess consort has arrived." The voice of the palace attendant came from outside the door. Prince Ding, who was dressed in white and had white hair, walked over hand in hand with princess consort, who was dressed in green and had black hair and a jade face. Just a glance at the crowd was enough to make them feel a heavy pressure. Lei Tingfeng looked at the beautiful couple in front of him. The expression in his eyes changed, but in an instant, he restrained all his emotions. He calmly stood up and cupped his hands, saying, "Prince Ding, princess consort. I have disturbed you. Please don't blame me." Yili looked at Lei Tingfeng with some surprise. In just 1 or 2 months, Lei Tingfeng had changed a lot. His handsome and tall figure faintly had some of Lei Jinting's magnanimity in the past. Mo Xiuyao also sized up Lei Tingfeng, but quickly turned away. He waved his hand and smiled, saying, "Genom of Gojoseon is too polite. Genom of Gojoseon has come from afar. Your presence brings light to the Prince Ding mansion. Genom of Gojoseon, please have a seat." No one mentioned the big battle that was fought a month ago, and no one mentioned Lei Jinting's death. Although many people in West Hill didn't look too good, they still restrained themselves. Mo Xiuyao pulled Yili to sit down and looked at Emperor Chu, Mo Suiyun, and Mo Jingyu on the other side. Mo Xiuyao stood up and bowed to Mo Xiuyao, saying, "Suiyun pays his respects to Uncle Prince Ding." Mo Xiuyao's eyes flashed, and he laughed loudly, saying, "Emperor Chu is a guest from afar. There is no need to be so polite. Please have a seat." A trace of disappointment flashed across Mo Jingyu's eyes. He sighed helplessly in his heart and smiled, saying, "Prince Ding is indeed the emperor's elder. It's not too much to call him uncle. Prince Ding doesn't mind." If they were really talking about the family tree and the backup, Mo Suiyun wouldn't call Mo Xiuyao uncle, but great uncle. However, Mo Xiuyao clearly didn't have any intention of getting involved with the Dechu state's royal family. Mo Jingyu also understood that Dechu state and the Prince Ding mansion had already fallen out. As long as Mo Xiuyao's brain didn't have any problems, those old pedant's whimsical ideas weren't reliable at all. Therefore, although he was disappointed, he didn't care too much. Chapter 1056. Mo Xiuyao smiled but didn't say anything. With his intelligence, how could he not know what the Dechu state was planning? It could only be said that those old men in Nanjing were the same as those in Glass City. They were all as naive. Seeing Mo Jingyu's awkwardness, Yili smiled and said, "Emperor Chu and Genom of Gojoseon have come from afar. It must have been a tiring journey. This consort has ordered people to prepare a guest house. I invite the 2 of you to rest there. This consort and the prince will hold a welcoming dinner for the 2 of you tonight." Lei Tingfeng nodded silently. "Thank you, princess." Although Lei Tingfeng had calmed down a lot these days, it was still difficult for him to face the enemy who had killed his father. Looking at the leisurely Mo Xiuyao and Yili in front of him, Lei Tingfeng suddenly felt a little weak. He didn't have the mood to say anything else. Mo Jingyu glanced at the clearly tired Mo Suiyun and nodded. "If that's the case, then thank you, princess. King Yu is too courteous." Yili smiled faintly. Soon, Lei Tingfeng, Mo Jingyu, and the others bid farewell and left. It was their first time in Glass City, so they had come to pay their respects. Even if there was something, they would have to wait until they had rested. Seeing the group leave, Yili sighed softly. Lei Tingfeng has changed a lot. No wonder he was able to control Xiling in such a short time. If a few more years pass, he will be a good opponent. Lei Tingfeng had been suppressed by Lei Jinting's brilliance for too long, so much so that he had lost his edge. Without Lei Jinting, this insurmountable mountain, Lei Tingfeng's growth and changes could be said to be rapid. Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows. Even if he is an opponent, he won't be Ai's opponent. Feng still needed a long time to truly grow. At that time, his opponent naturally wouldn't be him. Prince Ding calculated with satisfaction. He didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt for setting up a powerful opponent for his son. Yili looked at him helplessly and smiled faintly. What does the Chu state mean? With one arm around Yili, Mo Xiaoyao lazily said, what else could it mean? Those old fellows in Nanjing's imagination, see. Was there going to be another cycle of the Dechu state and the Mahist army entangling each other again? Yili stared blankly. She couldn't help but smile and shake her head. It had to be said that these old men in the imperial court who had monopolized power for their entire lives sometimes had complicated thoughts that made one dizzy. But sometimes, they were so naive that it made one want to laugh. How could they think that after the Mahist army and the Dechu state had broken off relations, and after the Mahist army had paid such a heavy price, the Prince Ding mansion and the Dechu state would still have a day of reconciliation? The people of the Prince Ding mansion weren't benevolent bodhisattvas. This shouldn't be Mo Jingyu's intention. Yili said. Although Mo Jingyu was respectful to Mo Xiaoyao, he wasn't very friendly. It was clear that he didn't think highly of these people's plans. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. For Mo Jingyu to be able to live until now and have so much power, he naturally isn't an idiot. It's impossible that he doesn't know this. It's just that, right now, I'm afraid that he's unable to completely control the entire imperial court of the Dechu state. Mo Jingli was a little stupid, but Jiangnan was his territory. And compared to Mo Jingli, it was clear that Mo Jingli's methods were more ruthless. When Mo Jingli was around, these old men didn't dare to cause trouble. Now that the new emperor had been installed, it would be strange if they didn't take advantage of their seniority. What do you plan to do? Yili asked with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao said, I've already defeated Mo Jingli and Mo Jingqi. Mo Suiyun is Mo Xiaobao's problem. Otherwise, others might think that I've gone against the imperial family of the Dechu state. They even bullied a teenage child. Later, I'll tell Mo Xiaobao to take a look at Mo Suiyun, lest the brat has nothing better to do and keep circling around Xian. You're saying Mo Suiyun. Yili frowned, looking at Mo Xiaoyao in confusion. If Mo Suiyun wasn't worth mentioning, Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't have specially asked Mo Xiaobao to visit him. Mo Xiaoyao chuckled softly. I think that brat might be a smart person. At least, he's smarter than his father and uncle. Yili sighed helplessly. She wasn't born in the imperial family after all. She wasn't worried about the dangers in the open, but she wasn't good at these things in the dark. At least, she didn't see anything strange about Mo Suiyun from their conversation just now. Mo Xiaoyao happily rubbed Yili's fragrant hair and smiled. That brat's acting skills aren't bad. If I hadn't met his gaze just now, I would have been fooled by him. When he looked at I, he didn't show as much fear as he did. But he's still a child after all. He probably didn't have anyone to teach him since he was young, so he still gave himself away. Yili nodded. It wasn't easy to not give herself away in front of Mo Xiaoyao. That child was probably purposely showing a fearful expression, but he didn't know that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Mo Xiaobao, if Mo Xiaobao can't even win against him, then he should be taught a lesson by Su Qingqin. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently. A Prince Ding mansion's heir who had been carefully taught since young couldn't even win against the little emperor who had just been pushed onto the throne. Chapter 1057. The Prince Ding mansion arranged for the Dechu state's posthouse to be located just 2 streets away from the Prince Ding mansion. For example, Xiling, Northern Army, Southern Army, etc., all had their own embassies in Glass City. However, the Dechu state never had one. Firstly, it was because the relationship between the Dechu state and the Prince Ding mansion was awkward. Secondly, neither Mo Jingli nor Mo Jingqi were willing to admit that the Prince Ding mansion was an independent power. Therefore, every time the Dechu state sent an envoy, it was always arranged by the Prince Ding mansion. However, this time, Mo Jingyu took the initiative to tell Mo Xiuyao that the Dechu state intended to set up an embassy in Glass City. His intention to show weakness was obvious. In the post house, Mo Suiyun shook off Mo Jingyu and the group of officials and walked into his room. His face, which was originally filled with a trace of cowardice and immaturity, immediately darkened. He walked to the side of the table and sat down, lost in thought. Before ascending the throne, Mo Suiyun never thought that he would one day become the ruler of a country. Just like his royal brother, Mo Suyun, who had passed away, his mother was just an unremarkable palace maid. Compared to Mo Suyun, he was even more obviously ignored. Even his name was given by his mother. Or perhaps, he was even luckier than Mo Suyun because he was not chosen by Mo Jingqi to inherit the throne at that time. All these years, as the emperor, Mo Suyun had been living in the palace, he could clearly see with his cold eyes what kind of life Mo Suyun was living. Originally, he thought that he would be an unremarkable prince and move out of the palace to live his life peacefully after he grew up. However, he never thought that one day, Mo Jingli, who was out on a campaign, would suddenly be deposed. Then, the Empress Dowager and all the royal relatives, civil and military officials found that he was the most suitable candidate. Following that, he became the Dechu state's emperor. Mo Jingli being deposed made him sigh in relief. Although he had only seen Mo Jingli a few times, every time he saw this Uncle Wang, he would feel a chill down his spine. He could clearly feel that Mo Jingli wanted to kill him. No, it should be said that Mo Jingli wanted to kill all the princes left behind by the previous emperor. And he didn't seem to be dead. It was only when he ascended to the throne that he realized the true suffering of his younger brother. In the eyes of the Empress Dowager and the nobles, this little emperor was just a chess piece in their game. Mo Suiyun knew that he didn't want that. He didn't want to be tied down by these people. He had heard a lot about Prince Ding, and he wanted to be like him. Therefore, his respect towards Prince Ding was not fake. He really respected and admired this world-shaking prince, so when he bowed to him, he couldn't help but look up at Prince Ding. Right now, he was only a pitiful child who was brought out by his annoying Lord Father to meet his future enemy. Mo Suiyun silently looked at Mo Xiaobao, who didn't regard himself as an outsider at all. He sat down and picked up the fruit on the table to wipe it before starting to eat. He only felt a dull pain in his forehead. His intuition from living in the palace for a long time told him that this boy with a pure smile in front of him was very troublesome. Mo Xiaobao looked at Mo Suiyun, who was standing silently at the side, and waved his hand, "Come and sit." Mo Suiyun walked to the opposite side of Mo Xiaobao and sat down. Looking at him eating happily, he secretly wondered if Prince Ding never allowed the heir to eat his fill. "What brings you here?" Mo Xiaobao smiled brightly at him and said, "To come and play with you. Lord Father said that I am the host and should take good care of the guests. I was afraid that you would be lonely, so I came to find you to play." Play? Mo Suiyun was a little confused. It wasn't that Mo Suiyun didn't know what was good for him as a guest, but he really couldn't understand when he had such a good relationship with the little heir of the Prince Ding mansion that they could go and play together. Mo Xiaobao raised his chin and looked at him proudly. "How is it? Are you going or not?" Meeting Mo Xiaobao's provocative gaze, Mo Suiyun suddenly gritted his teeth and nodded heavily. "I'll go. I'm also an emperor, why would I be afraid of you, heir?" "So, little emperor, you're certain that Mo Xiaobao won't dare to kill you, so you're going out to play with him?" Chapter 1058. Mo Suiyun got up and was about to open the door and leave. Mo Xiaobao hurriedly pulled him back and said, "What are you doing?" Mo Suiyun looked at him strangely and said, "Aren't you going out to play?" Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes and pointed to the half-opened window, saying, "I came in from there." "How are you going to tell others why I appeared in the Chu State's post house? If Imperial Father finds out, I will be in big trouble." "Then what do you want to do?" Mo Xiaobao pointed to the window with a pure smile and said, "Let's climb over the wall." "Climb over the wall?" Mo Suiyun almost exclaimed. Mo Xiaobao had already jumped onto the window by himself. He held onto the window with one hand and looked outside before turning back and saying, "Are you afraid?" Mo Suiyun took a deep breath and said, "Who's afraid? Let's go." "That's more like it." Mo Xiaobao nodded and jumped down from the window. Mo Suiyun was shocked and hurriedly climbed up to take a look. He saw Mo Xiaobao leaning against the corner of the wall and waving at him impatiently. Mo Suiyun didn't know martial arts and climbed down from the window in a sorry state. He followed behind Mo Xiaobao and walked stealthily in the post house. They actually managed to find their way out of the post house's back door without being discovered by anyone. It was obvious that this wasn't the first time Mo Xiaobao had done this. Outside the post house's back door, a few figures surrounded them the moment they stepped out and pulled them along as they ran. After stopping at a safe place, Mo Suiyun finally had the time to size up the few people in front of him. Only then did he realize that these few people in front of him were actually children younger than him. Looking at Mo Xiaobao, who was half a head shorter than him, a feeling of being an adult and a sense of mission arose spontaneously. "Brother Xiaobao, this is the little emperor from the Chu state." Ling Junhan, who was wearing a white brocade robe, was still young, but she already had some of her father's demeanor. She slowly fanned herself with a small fan in her hand. Those who didn't know would think that she was a hedonistic son of a rich family. At the side, Su Jirue, who had inherited his father's solemn expression, looked at Mo Suiyun and frowned. "If you don't change your clothes, you'll be discovered." Mo Suiyun broke out in a cold sweat from being stared at by these two little radish heads that didn't even reach his chin. Beside them, Mu Lai, who had changed his name to Qin Lai, casually threw a bundle over and said, "I knew you would forget. Clothes." Mo Xiaobao raised his eyebrows in disdain. "I didn't change my clothes, but didn't I still walk out of there? What tight security, they can't even withstand a single blow." Father was right. What they were playing with was their heartbeat. Kidnapping the Chu State's little emperor from the post house, how fun would that be? Pretending to be a servant and sneaking out was not challenging at all. Ling Junhan looked at Mo Suiyun with a smile and drooled. "Little emperor, this is my first time seeing a real emperor alive." Mo Suiyun's head was covered in cold sweat. He had always felt that the Chu Palace was filled with danger, but at this moment, he suddenly felt that he would rather go back and face the Empress Dowager and those officials than face these kids who obviously had mental problems. Did this white and tender little bun in front of him think that he was a roast duck? That drooling look. Mo Suiyun decided that he had to stay away from this white and tender little fool. If Ling Junhan knew what Mo Suiyun was thinking, she would definitely cry out that she was wronged. He just hadn't seen an emperor before. After all, the most important person he had seen in his life was the prince. Although this prince was a top figure that many emperors were afraid of, he wasn't an emperor. It wasn't easy to see a living little emperor, so the extremely curious Ling Junhan naturally had to study him carefully. Qin Lai glanced at the uneasy little emperor with a faint smile. He did look better than Mo Suiyun, but he didn't see anything else. He was casually kidnapped by the little prince. Didn't he consider how many people would be frightened by the sudden disappearance of the Chu State's little emperor from the post house? However, Qinlai didn't care about this. How the little prince liked to play was his business. He only needed to be responsible for their safety. Under Mo Xiaobao's urging, Mo Suiyun went to change into an ordinary set of clothes that Qinlai had prepared. This way, these few children looked like a group of ordinary children from wealthy families. Glass City was now filled with many influential families and wealthy merchants. Normally, there would be children from influential families playing on the streets, so no one would pay attention to them even if they were walking on the streets. Mo Suiyun was born in the palace and only went out twice in his life. The first time was when he followed the Dechu state's imperial court to the south, and the second time was when he came north to Glass City. Naturally, everything they saw was new and interesting to them. Aside from Qinlai, who was experienced and knowledgeable, even Ling Junhan and Su Jiroe had grown up running all over the place and were already used to it. Rather than going out to play, it was more like these few children accommodating this country bumpkin Emperor Mo Suiyun and strolling around. When Mo Suiyun felt a little hungry, Mo Xiaobao very generously led him to the best restaurant in Glass City for a meal. The waiter of the restaurant was obviously very familiar with Mo Xiaobao's group. When he saw them enter, he came forward and led them to the quietest room on the second floor. Mo Suiyun sat in the room and tried his best to suppress his curiosity and uneasiness. He asked, "Prince, do you come here often?" Mo Xiaobao smiled and said, "Not often. We come once in a while, but the food here is delicious. You don't have to be polite. This restaurant belongs to Qinlai's family, they won't take our money." Qinlai silently rolled his eyes. "Even if you're eating for free, you don't have to say it so openly, okay? Little prince, do you still remember that this little emperor is your enemy?" Mo Suiyun looked at them enviously and said, "It's good to be like you." Ling Junhan blinked and tilted her head to look at him. "If you like, you can stay and play with us. We won't bully you." Among this group of people, Ling Junhan had the best impression of Mo Suiyun. Although this good impression was built on the fact that he was the first emperor she had seen. Mo Suiyun was stunned and shook his head. "I can't stay." Ling Junhan nodded in understanding. "I know. You're the emperor of Dechu State. Is it fun to be the emperor?" Mo Suiyun shook his head bitterly. "It's not fun at all. Not fun." Ling Junhan touched her head and asked, "Brother Xiaobao, do you still want to be the emperor?" The little emperor said that being the emperor isn't fun. Mo Xiaobao snorted in disdain. "This prince will be Prince Ding in the future. What's so great about being the emperor? This prince wants to be Prince Ding, understand? The emperor is older than Prince Ding." Su Jiroe calmly taught his cousin basic knowledge. Mo Xiaobao glanced at him. Which emperor dares to say that he's older than father? Everyone looked at each other and shrugged in the end. Indeed, in this world, at least for now, there probably wasn't any emperor who dared to challenge Prince Ding. Su Jiroe insisted. Even so, the emperor is still older. Chapter 1059. Mo Xiaobao frowned and thought for a while before saying, "All right, then I still want to be Prince Ding first." If he did not step on his imperial father, how could he stand up again? There was no need to think about being the emperor. Mo Xiaobao confidently calculated in his heart. Mo Suiyun ate the fragrant dishes on the table while saying, "What if you don't become Prince Ding, what will you do?" Mo Xiaobao looked at him strangely and said, "Why won't I become Prince Ding? Isn't there a little prince in the Prince Ding mansion?" Mo Suiyun said casually, "Just like how the throne is not necessarily passed to the crown prince, the Prince Ding position is not necessarily passed to the eldest son." Mo Xiaobao thought for a while and nodded. "You are right. Thank you for your reminder, I will do my best to spur Lin to be a good younger brother. Mo Suiyun smiled faintly and said, You're welcome, I just casually mentioned it, you don't have to take it to heart. Oh right, Mo Suiyun. I heard that the Empress Dowager of Dechu State is very fierce. Is your grandmother good to you? Mo Xiaobao's eyes turned as he asked with concern. Mo Suiyun's hand that was holding the chopsticks paused and said with a smile, Grandmother is very good to me. You are so fortunate, my father is very fierce to me. You are the emperor, everyone has to listen to you. I am the little prince, my father bullies me all the time. Mo Xiaobao sighed enviously. Mo Suiyun's smile was somewhat bitter, how could he be so fortunate as the emperor? Sometimes, he couldn't even order the servants around him, not to mention everyone else listening to him. Looking at Mo Xiaobao who was innocently asking him all sorts of questions, as well as Ling Junhan, Su Jiruei, and Qin Lai who were happily eating at the side, Mo Suiyun suddenly felt a bit of jealousy in his heart. Why could they live such a carefree and happy life, while he had to carefully live his life in the Chu Palace like he was treading on thin ice? I will definitely be more powerful than my father in the future. Mo Xiaobao slapped the table and shouted loudly. Ling Junhan and the others who were eating next to him glanced at him silently, then ignored him and continued to eat. Xiaobao immediately refused to comply and shouted, I will definitely be more powerful than father. Mo Suiyun looked at his angry look and said with a smile, I believe in you. You definitely will. Hearing his words, Mo Xiaobao immediately became happy. He patted his shoulder and said, That's right. I knew we were on the same side. In the future, you will definitely be more powerful than your father. Let's work together. The corner of Mo Suiyun's lips twitched. He was a little unsure if Mo Xiaobao's words were a blessing or a curse. Although he didn't have any impression of his father, he still knew that he was a failure as an emperor. But when she saw Xiaobao's sincere expression as he gnawed on a crystal pork shoulder, she decided to treat it as a blessing. By the time Mo Jingyu finally found them after making a ruckus in Glass City, the children had already finished their meal and were scattered all over the place. As soon as they opened the door, they saw a table full of delicacies that had been ruined. Only the leftovers were placed messily on the table. Ling Junhan was full from eating and was lying on the couch rubbing her stomach. The others were huddled together and chattering about something. Of course, most of the time, it was Mo Xiaobao who was talking. The cold-faced Su Jiruei would occasionally add a few words. The remaining two were purely listeners. Your Majesty. Mo Jingyu called out in a deep voice. Mo Suiyun was startled. Only then did he remember that Mo Jingyu didn't know that he had run out of the inn. He hurriedly wanted to stand up, but Mo Xiaobao said in a low voice, Don't be afraid of him. You are the emperor. You don't have to be afraid of him. Mo Suiyun cast a grateful glance at him, then stood up and said, Uncle Wang, what's the matter? Mo Jingyu raised his eyebrows. Before he could say anything, Feng Zhiyao walked out from behind him with a smile and said, King Yu, didn't you see what I said? How could something happen to the emperor in Glass City? Mo Jingyu suppressed the anger in his heart and nodded at Feng Zhiyao before asking, Your Majesty, why are you here? Mo Suiyun said in a low voice, I came out to play with the little prince. Mo Jingyu took a deep breath and said, If your Majesty wants to come out to play in the future, it's better to bring people along so that the people below won't worry. Mo Suiyun nodded and said, Uncle Wang, I know I was wrong. Seeing that he really knew he was wrong, Mo Jingyu nodded and this matter was considered over. Mo Suiyun had always been obedient. His sudden disappearance from the inn had indeed frightened the people of Dechu State. Fortunately, news quickly came from the Prince Ding mansion that Mo Suiyun, Mo Xiaobao, and the others were eating here. Mo Jingyu looked inside and saw that the children were lying on the soft couch and looking at him innocently. Mo Jingyu really did not dare to believe that these children, who were several years younger than Mo Suiyun, were able to trick Mo Suiyun, the always cautious little emperor, into sneaking out of the inn to play. Mo Xiaobao felt that he should say something. He blinked and said to Mo Jingyu, "King Yu, don't be angry at Brother Suiyun. It's all my fault. Originally, I wanted to go to the inn to visit Brother Suiyun, but he refused to see me. In a moment of anger, I secretly ran to his room. Brother Suiyun couldn't stand my pleading and only came out to play with us." Mo Jingyu smiled faintly and said, "Your Highness's words are too serious. In the future, Your Highness can directly come to the inn to play with Your Majesty. However, right now, the entire inn is looking for Your Majesty. We should go back." Mo Suiyun obediently stood up and followed Mo Jingyu. Mo Xiaobao did not forget to reluctantly send him to the door and promised that he would come to play with him tomorrow. Feng Zhiyao leaned against the door and looked at the four little rascals with a radiant smile, asking, "How was it? Is the little emperor of Dechu State fun?" Ling Junhan shook her head and said, "Not fun. He's so silly." Su Jirue tilted his head and thought, "Not fun. He's so hypocritical." Qin Lai rolled his eyes. "He's even more annoying than Mo Suiyun." Mo Suiyun was timid and weak. When the time came, he would not be so timid, but he was too scheming. Mo Xiaobao smiled and touched his little chin. "Fun. He's so silly and scheming. He actually wants to sow discord. My little brother is not even a year old yet." Chapter 1060. Mo Suiyun, who was brought back to the post house by Mo Jingyu, naturally didn't know what the brats were saying about him. He also didn't have the mood to think about it. As a newly ascended little emperor who was no better than a puppet, he naturally couldn't avoid being admonished and reprimanded by Mo Jingyu. Therefore, Mo Suiyun also understood that before he had real power, he didn't have the right to copy Mo Xiaobao. Even if he didn't like the heartless Prince Ding Mansion's little heir and his friends, he didn't have the right to compete with the Prince Ding Mansion's little heir unless he had real power in Dechu State. Therefore, Mo Suiyun quickly put aside today's matter and focused all his attention on dealing with Mo Jingyu and the officials of Dechu State. At this moment, the little emperor, Mo Suiyun, didn't think that he, who was tricked by the heartless Mo Xiaobao with a few words, was even more heartless than a certain someone, to the extent that he suffered countless losses in the hands of a certain someone. In the restaurant, after Mo Xiaobao and the others sent off Mo Suiyun, the outsider, and Feng Zhiyao, the suspected spy of Prince Ding, they closed the door and started discussing again. Mo Xiaobao cupped his chin and looked at Qin Lai, asking, "Royal father seems to think highly of this Mo Suiyun. Qin Lai, do you think Mo Suiyun will win or be as unlucky as Mo Suiyun?" Qin Lai thought for a while and shook his head, saying, "It's hard to say. Mo Suiyun is definitely more daring and scheming than Mo Suiyun. I just don't know if Mo Jingyu has any ambition." Ling Junhan lay on the soft couch and said lazily, "Doesn't Dechu State have an old witch? She definitely wants to help her grandson. Other than Mo Suiyun, Dechu State shouldn't have many princes, right? They can't be casually swapped. Dechu State's Empress Dowager is also very old," Su Jirue said seriously with a cold face. Mo Xiaobao blinked and said faintly, "So Mo Suiyun's chances of winning are still very high. As long as he's not an idiot. But he really does seem a little silly." Ling Junhan said worriedly. In her opinion, anyone who could be fooled by Xiaobao Mo was a fool. A person like Xiaobao Mo couldn't even be trusted with a single expression. Xiaobao rolled his eyes and said, "Then let's remind him. We are good friends. Whatever. Ling Junhan and Su Jirue didn't mind. Ling Junhan continued to rub her stomach while Su Jirue sat by the side and read a book with great interest. Qin Lai faintly glanced at the three children who were a few years younger than him. When he first met these guys, he felt that he was indeed a good person. After spending some time together, he began to wonder if he would still be a good person in the future. On the other side of the room, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao sat leisurely as they listened to the children next door discuss the big plan. Feng Zhiyao, Leng Haoyu, and the others sat at the side and looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a smile. When they finished their discussion, the sound of the children's footsteps could be heard from outside. Feng Zhiyao couldn't help but laugh out loud. He shook his head in pain and said, "What kind of evil has this world done to give birth to such evildoers?" How old were these children? They were already thinking about how to scheme against the little emperors of other countries. Even when they were at this age, they were still fighting and playing truant. What would happen after a few years? Leng Haoyu sighed helplessly and said, "One is marked by the company one keeps. Our Junhan has been led astray." Back then, his precious son was a soft and cute little bun. Of course, his son was also very cute now, but his personality was slightly twisted. This was definitely a case of one is marked by the company one keeps. Leng Haoyu felt a little guilty. It was all because he didn't have time to take care of his son that he got too close to Mo Xiaobao from the Prince Ding mansion. It was really a case of one is marked by the company one keeps. You speak as if your son is innocent. Mo Xiaoyao lazily glanced at Leng Haoyu. Mo Xiaobao looked listless and bad, but that brat from the Leng family was wearing a layer of silly outer clothing. Feng Zhiyao said with some curiosity, looking at Mo Xiaobao's intention, he wants to help the little emperor of the Dechu state. Is this not a problem? One had to know that the little emperor wasn't someone easy to deal with. He knew how to sow discord at such a young age, and he hit the nail on the head. Although he was a little immature and didn't fool Mo Xiaobao, one had to know that the little emperor had only ascended the throne for less than 2 months. Before that, he was raised without anyone to discipline him. From this point of view, as long as someone gave him some pointers, the little emperor's future achievements would be limitless. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "What problem can there be? Even if there is a problem, it's his problem. Don't tell me I can kill all the people who are a threat for him. He wasn't a father who spoiled his child. You're really at ease." Feng Zhiyao and Leng Haoyu looked at each other, then looked at Yi Li disapprovingly. Yi Li smiled faintly. That little emperor wants to control the real power of the Dechu state. No matter how talented he is, it won't be possible without 10 years. There's no need to worry now. Compared to spending 10 years to let Mo Jingyu or any other adult control the power, it was better to give the little emperor 10 years to fight for power. 10 years later, no matter if it was Mo Xiaobao or the entire Prince Ding mansion, they would have recovered from the 2 years of war. At that time, Mo Suiyun might not be able to fully control the real power of the Dechu state. To put it bluntly, Mo Xiaobao didn't have any intention of helping Mo Suiyun. He just didn't want Mo Suiyun to be finished so quickly. It had to be said that from a certain point of view, Mo Xiaobao had already begun to take the shape of his father. Children nowadays are really amazing. Feng Zhiyao sighed. Or was it that the children of the Prince Ding mansion were especially abnormal? Prince, Princess. Yaoji asked for an audience at the door. Ever since returning to Glass City, Yaoji returned to the restaurant she had been running for several years and lived a peaceful life. However, she would occasionally collect some information for the Prince Ding mansion. In general, she lived a normal life. King Yuk seems to have secretly sent someone to contact King Chongqing. Yaoji reported in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand, as expected. What's King Chongqing's attitude? Yaoji said, King Changxing didn't send anyone to King Yu. He probably doesn't want to have too much to do with them. Mo Xiuyao nodded, that brother and sister aren't stupid. As long as they don't do anything, we don't have to worry about them. Lang Haoyu pondered for a moment and said, I remember. King Changxing and Princess Xin Ning still have a younger brother in Nanjing. Will there be any trouble at that time? Even if the Dechu state was now peaceful in Jiangnan, it would definitely not be so peaceful. Who knows, they might do something with the little prince. They still had to be on guard. Mo Xiuyao said indifferently, they live a peaceful life. I naturally won't treat them unfairly. If they do something they shouldn't do, don't blame I for being merciless. Keep an eye on them. Chapter 1061. Yaoji nodded and hesitated for a moment before saying, it seems like someone saw Mo Jingli appear in the northwest. Mo Jingli. Everyone was stunned. They were surprised to hear this name. Ever since Liang was broken, Mo Jingli had disappeared without a trace. It wasn't that they didn't think of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots, but it was because Feihong Pass was in a state of emergency that they couldn't find the time to do so. After that, when the display was over, Mo Jingli had already disappeared without a trace. In this world, there was a sea of people. If one really wanted to hide, it wouldn't be easy to find someone. Moreover, Mo Jingli had been stripped of his throne. He didn't have any troops or power in his hands. His martial arts weren't that high either, so not many people cared about his whereabouts. Are you sure? Mo Xiuyao frowned and asked. Yaoji shook her head and said, I can't be sure for now. Mo Xiuyao thought for a moment and said, reveal this news to Mo Jingyu. Mo Jingyu, who now held the power of the Dechu state, probably didn't want to see Mo Jingli appear more than them, right? This subordinate obeys. Yaoji nodded and replied. In a small hidden village outside of Glass City, a man wearing coarse clothes with a face full of beard sat in a simple room with a twisted expression, lost in thought. Your Majesty. A similarly dressed man walked in and bowed. The man turned to look at him and said coldly, is there any news from Glass City? The man said in a deep voice, King Yu has already brought the newly ascended emperor, Mo Suiyun, to Glass City. At the same time, the newly appointed Genom of Gojoseon, Lei Dingfeng, also arrived. Today, the little heir of Prince Ding's residence secretly brought Mo Suiyun and sneaked out. Mo Jingyu almost overturned this Glass City. In the end, he found the little emperor in a restaurant. The man in coarse clothes, Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. He sneered and said, Mo Jingyu really thinks highly of this Mo Suiyun. I didn't expect that the one who would stab me in the back would be him. In fact, Mo Jingli wasn't the only one who had stabbed him in the back. The Empress Dowager, the ministers and nobles in the court, and even the entire Dechu state's imperial family. From this, it could be seen how unpopular Mo Jingli was. The man hesitated for a moment before carefully asking, Your Majesty, should we? Mo Jingli sneered. No, send a message to Mo Jingyu. Tell him that we want to see him. This. Your Majesty, could this be? They could be considered to be fugitives right now. No matter if they were caught by the Prince Ding mansion or the Dechu state's imperial court, they would definitely not have a good ending. At this time, the emperor still wanted to take the initiative to deliver himself to the door. How could people not worry? Mo Jingli said in a low voice, we only know what to do. Go and do it. After hesitating for a moment, the man nodded and turned to leave. Mo Jingli lowered his eyes to stare at the somewhat crude and dirty table in front of him. His expression kept changing. 2 months ago, If someone had told him that he would one day wear crude and dirty rags and live in this shabby room that could barely shelter him from the wind and rain, he would definitely have torn that person to pieces. But in this month, Mo Jingli could be said to have suffered a lot. In order to avoid the Prince Ding mansion and the Dechu state's imperial court search, he not only disguised himself as a commoner and ate coarse food, but he even had to deal with beggars and vagabonds. He suffered a lot and took countless dangerous paths to avoid everyone's eyes and ears to sneak into the vicinity of Glass City. His goal naturally wasn't just to take a look. Although he was in such dire straits right now, Mo Jingli had been a prince and an emperor for decades. He more or less had some hidden cards in his hands that no one knew about. It was because of this that he had the courage to sneak into the northwest and find his way to the Mahist army's headquarters, Glass City. But he wasn't in a hurry to enter the city. Right now, Glass City was definitely heavily guarded. Although there weren't many people who could recognize him, Mo Jingli had already experienced the power of the Mahist army's shadow guard. So he didn't want to be too impatient and take the risk. As for Mo Jingli, a cold smile appeared on Mo Jingli's face. He dared to meet Mo Jingyu openly, so he naturally had enough chips to protect himself. In an inconspicuous little tea house in Glass City, Mo Jingyu pushed open the door to a side room and saw the man in plain clothes sitting inside. He raised his eyebrows and said, "You're quite daring." Indeed, he was quite daring. If it was someone else, they definitely wouldn't dare to sneak into the Mahist army's headquarters. Mo Jingli lightly snorted. He sized up Mo Jingyu for a moment and said mockingly, "You're holding great power now. We really didn't expect that in the end. The one who would benefit from it would be you." Mo Jingyu didn't mind. He cupped his hands and smiled, "You're too polite. It's just a coincidence. What business do you have with me?" Mo Jingyu didn't place Mo Jingli in his eyes at all. In the past, he was the powerful Prince Li, Emperor Chu. But now, he was the assistant prince of the Dechu state. And Mo Jingli was just a stray dog who had to hide in a sorry state. Thinking of this, Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with a trace of pleasure. Mo Jingli said, "Of course there's a business. I want you to help me do something. Why do you think I'll agree?" Mo Jingyu raised his eyebrows. Mo Jingli looked at him and asked, "Then, do you want the Dechu state's imperial jade seal?" "So it was you who took the imperial jade seal?" Mo Jingyu's face darkened as he said coldly. Ever since Mo Jingli's disappearance, whether it was in Nanjing or Liang, the Dechu state's imperial jade seal had not been found. The imperial jade seal symbolized the supreme imperial power. Although it wasn't impossible to make another one, if the imperial jade seal was left outside, it would be a huge joke to the Dechu state's imperial family. If someone came out with the imperial jade seal to cause trouble in the future, it would be even more troublesome. So the Dechu state's imperial family secretly sent people to search for Mo Jingli. One reason was to get rid of him, and the other was to find the imperial jade seal's whereabouts. Mo Jingli smiled, "You don't have to help me. We can also give the imperial jade seal to someone else. Of course, there's also Prince Yu's smiling face. This someone else was naturally his political enemy. For example, ever since the new emperor ascended the throne, his brothers who gradually wanted to compete with him, or the Empress Dowager. Right now, Mo Jingchi was dead, and Mo Jingli was stranded outside. The Empress Dowager was old, and the emperor was young. There were more and more people who had other thoughts. If the imperial jade seal fell into someone else's hands, it wouldn't be a good thing for Mo Jingyu. "What do you want me to do?" Mo Jingyu asked in a low voice. Mo Jingli said coldly, "I want you to help me, get rid of Mo Suiyun and Mo Yuchen." "You're crazy." Mo Jingyu stood up and turned to leave. "You really won't consider it?" Mo Jingli's voice came from behind. Mo Jingyu turned around and sneered, "Consider it. Do you think I'm stupid? Kill Mo Yuchen in Glass City. Don't mention killing Mo Yuchen. I'm afraid if I touch a single hair on his head, I'll die without a complete corpse." The Imperial Jade Seal was very attractive, but even if he gave the throne to him, he had to be alive to enjoy it. "You think I can't do it?" Mo Jingli wasn't nervous at all. Compared to Mo Jingyu, he didn't need to be too nervous. He had already lost everything he could. The only thing he had left was probably his own life. However, he, Mo Jingli, couldn't live in hiding forever. Rather than that, he might as well fight to the death. But Mo Jingyu was different. He had endured for half his life. Now that he finally had power, he naturally had to be careful with every step, afraid that he would make a mistake. Chapter 1062. Mo Jingyu smiled coldly, not even bothering to answer this question. Ever since Mo Xiaoyao drew a clear line between himself and the Dechu state, he had never thought that Mo Jingli or Mo Jingqi would be able to defeat him. Even Mo Jingli, who was once the ruler of a country, was unable to do so, let alone this Mo Jingli who was currently hiding from place to place. Mo Jingli did not mind his disdain. He smiled and said, "Since that's the case, we can first show you my sincerity." "How about Mo Xiaoyun?" "What do you mean?" Mo Jingyu asked warily. Mo Jingli said, "Mo Xiaoyun and Zhen Ning are living very freely in Glass City." "That's right, they are Mo Jingqi's princes and princesses, but they have sought refuge in the Prince Ding mansion. Even if it was for the sake of the people of the world, Ding Palace would definitely protect them well. Say, if Mo Xiaoyun and Zhen Ning suddenly died under the protection of the Prince Ding mansion, what would happen? More interestingly, if they died on the eve of the Prince Ding mansion's little heir and princess first birthday banquet, Mo Xiaoyao's expression would definitely change. If you think it's not enough, how about adding in the Queen of Nanzhao?" Mo Jingli continued, his eyes flashing with the same expression. Mo Jingyu looked at him calmly and said, "You want to ruin the Prince Ding mansion's banquet. What's the point of that?" Before the Prince Ding mansion's banquet, the Prince of Changxing and Princess Zhen Ning, who died under the protection of the Prince Ding mansion, was naturally a ruthless slap to the Prince Ding mansion's face. And if something happened to the Queen of Nanzhao in Glass City, the Prince Ding mansion would most likely have to give Nanzhao an explanation. Point. We want to see if Mo Xiaoyao's expression will change. Mo Jingli smiled happily. "You're really crazy," Mo Jingyu said in a low voice. Mo Jingli's expression changed as he said angrily, "That's right. This emperor is crazy. This was all because of Mo Xiaoyao. I was forced by you. You traitors. You traitor." Mo Jingli sneered. Looking at Mo Jingli's crazed and twisted expression, he indifferently said, "You speak as if you are loyal to your country. Why do you think all the civil and military officials agreed to depose you? Mo Jingli, even if you return to Jiangnan now, you will only be a rat that everyone hates. Using the southern border's secret medicine to kill 2 previous emperors, who would dare to recognize you as their master? Empress Dowager." Mo Jingli gritted his teeth. Only the Empress Dowager knew the truth. Mo Jingyu smiled. "Isn't that so? Even your own mother has turned her back on you. This shows how much of a failure you are. What right do you have to call others rebels and traitors? What kind of betrayal was this? At most, what we are doing is driving out the rebels and upholding the orthodoxy." Unexpectedly, Mo Jingli did not explode in anger. After a long silence, he finally opened his mouth. "This emperor does not wish to speak nonsense with you. Do you need my help or not?" Mo Jingyu shook his head. "Forgive me for being unable to help. Goodbye." 3 years ago, how did you spend the 300,000 taels of silver that you took from the northern tribes? Mo Jingli's sinister voice came from behind him. You! Mo Jingyu suddenly turned around, his face ashen as he glared at Mo Jingli. I do not know what you are talking about. It's fine if you don't know, if others know, then keep it in their hearts. For example, Uncle Wang, or the other brothers. What do you think? Mo Jingli coldly smiled. Mo Jingyu was silent for a long time. Finally, he walked back and sat down. He stared at Mo Jingli for a long time before saying, How do I know if you are lying to me? Mo Jingli smiled. You can give it a try. When you return to Nanjing, will you become a rat that everyone wants to beat up like me? Tell me, between regicide and betrayal, which one is more hateful? Mo Jingyu's face was as dark as ink. After a long time, he said, When did you? Mo Jingli lightly snorted. Naturally, I only found out after moving the capital to Jiangnan. Otherwise, do you think this emperor would tolerate you? At that time, this emperor also did not want to tolerate you. However, at that time, the imperial court was already in a mess. Since you were still obedient, this emperor kept you. Now, it seems, this emperor was right to keep you. If this time, it was someone he did not have a handle on, this person would most likely have sold him to Mo Xiuyao. Mo Jingli looked at him, his smile sinister. You can go and tell Mo Xiuyao. At most, we will die together. In any case, this emperor has nothing to worry about. I need to think about it. Mo Jingyu closed his eyes, speaking in a low voice. Clearly, he was struggling fiercely in his heart. Mo Jingli shrugged, making a casual gesture. Mo Jingyu said, If I help you, how will I escape? If I have to die, compared to dying in Mo Xiuyao's hands, would rather go back to Jiangnan. He had heard of Mo Xiuyao's methods of torturing people. Anyone who had the slightest choice would definitely not be willing to fall into Mo Xiuyao's hands. Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with a cold smile. He said mildly, Don't worry, I don't need you to do too much. As long as you handle it well, no one will find out. When the time comes, you can naturally take the imperial jade seal back to Jiangnan to be your Kingyu. Mo Jingyu took a deep breath, finally making up his mind. Alright, I promise you. Mo Jingli nodded in satisfaction. That's good. When this emperor is ready, this emperor will naturally inform you. You can go back first. Mo Jingyu stood up, walking towards the door. When he reached the door, he stopped, staring at Mo Jingli. You'd better be careful. If anything happens, we'll all die together. Seeing Mo Jingli's figure disappear through the door, the smile on Mo Jingli's face became even more twisted and sinister. Haha, of course we'll die together. Otherwise, why would I look for you? Unfortunately, you don't know that Mo Xiuyao's specialty is not torturing people, but venting his anger. Whether or not it was related to Mo Xiuyao, whether or not there was evidence, as long as something happened to Mo Yuchen, Mo Xiuyao would definitely vent his anger on everyone. Including the royal family of Dechu State far away in Jiangnan. Since you've betrayed this emperor, then let's die together. Unfortunately, if he could drag Mo Xiuyao and Yili down with him, it would be even better. Chapter 1063. In the study of the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xiuyao, Yili, Su Qingchen, and the others were discussing matters when Qin Feng came to request an audience. Prince's consort, Qin Feng requests an audience. Yili frowned slightly. Come in. What's the matter? Qin Feng stepped into the study and scanned the people in the room. Su Qingchen, Feng Zhiyao, Han Mingyue, and the others were all trusted by the prince's consort. He did not hesitate any longer and reported in a deep voice, Mo Jingyu secretly went to a small tea house in the city to meet someone. This subordinate suspects that this person is Mo Jingli. Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows and asked, "Where is he?" Qin Feng lowered his head in shame. "He slipped away. That tea house is very likely Mo Jingli's secret base in Glass City. Prince, please punish us." By the time the Prince Ding Mansion's people had sneaked in, the entire tea house was already empty. It was clear that this place was specially set up, and there was even a secret passage for people to escape. Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand and said indifferently, "There is no such thing as an airtight wall in this world. You can't be blamed for this. Can you be sure that it is Mo Jingli? What does he want from Mo Jingyu?" Han Mingyue smiled. Mo Jingli still dares to come to Glass City. His intentions are clear. As for Mo Jingli, I'm afraid that he has something on him and is being blackmailed. Su Qingchen nodded, agreeing with Han Mingyue's opinion. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li, he said, "Let Xiao Bao be more careful in this period of time." Although Mo Jingli might hate Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li more, with their abilities, it was very difficult to harm them. And Mo Xiaobao, who had yet to grow up, would naturally become the most obvious weakness. Yi Li nodded solemnly and remembered Su Qingchen's reminder. In fact, she was planning to send more people to protect Mo Xiaobao. No matter how smart Mo Xiaobao was, he was only a 10-year-old child. Feng Zhiyao frowned and said, "Mo Jingli has become smarter. Even the shadow guards of the Prince Ding Mansion can't catch him." Han Mingyue laughed and said, "It's not that I've become smarter, it's just that I'm like a bird startled by the twang of a bow and afraid of death." If he had really become smarter, he wouldn't have come to Glass City. Lang Haoyu said worriedly, "For him to be able to sneak into Glass City, it at least proves that he has some useful people under him. I'm afraid that now that he has nothing left, I'm afraid that he wants to die together with the Prince Ding Mansion. This kind of person is always dangerous, it's better to catch him as soon as possible." Everyone nodded. Idiots weren't scary, smart people weren't scary, the scariest thing was a madman who thought he was smart and wasn't afraid of death. Because it was hard to guess what he wanted to do. Hearing Lang Haoyu's words, Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows thoughtfully. Su Qingchen glanced at him and asked, "Prince, do you have any plans?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "It's just Mo Jingli, don't worry too much about him. I have my own plans. There are still a few days until Lin and Axayan's first birthday banquet, you should put in more effort. There seems to be a lot of people coming this year." Feng Zhiyao nodded and smiled, "That's right. Other than the northern tribes, the Chu State and Xiling's envoys who are already in Glass City, the Queen and her husband of the southern Zhao, Princess Helan of the northern territories and the envoys of the western regions are already on their way. They'll reach Glass City in a few days. Looks like Qing Ming and Zhang Qilan are doing well in Xiling." Mo Xiaoyao stroked his chin and smiled. The Emperor of Xiling City was located in the far west, bordering the western regions. However, the relationship between Xiling and the western regions had always been in a state of hostility. Not to mention the fact that the western regions sent envoys to congratulate them, even the trade routes between the two countries were often intermittent. In the early years, the trade routes between the western regions and the central plains were maintained by the Prince Ding Mansion and Xiling. It wasn't until the Mahist army took over most of the northern regions of Xiling that the trade between the central plains and the western regions was truly smooth. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, "I heard that there were a few battles in the beginning. Now that the Prince Ding Mansion is rising like the sun, even the people of the western regions know how to read people's expressions. It's natural for them to send envoys to congratulate us. Oh right, Qin Bai and the rest are also coming back with the envoys from the western regions. They'll be here in about 2 days. Su Qingchen nodded and said, then, we'll leave the envoys of the western regions to Qingze. It just so happened that Su Qingze and Su Qingbai were brothers, so if there were any problems, they could communicate with each other. Su Qingchen and Su Qingze nodded, indicating that they had no objections. After the discussion, everyone left. Yili looked at Imo Xiuyao and asked, what do you plan to do about Imo Jingli? Imo Xiuyao took her into his arms and laughed softly, don't be nervous, there are many people following Xiao Bao. He's not someone easy to deal with either. If he really meets Imo Jingli, it's hard to say who will be at a disadvantage. Yili frowned and said unhappily, he's still a child. In the Prince Ding mansion, there are no children after the age of 10. We can't always be by his side. There will be a day when he has to be independent. Yili sighed silently. Although she understood that Imo Xiuyao was doing this for the sake of Xiao Bao, but for a child who was born in the spring breeze and grew up under the red flag, even though he was born into a military family, he still grew up like a normal child. It was very hard for Yili to accept this kind of situation where a child was treated like an adult. In her previous life, when she was 10 years old, she was still fooling around with a group of girls and boys in the courtyard. But the current situation did not allow Xiao Bao to slowly grow up. With Imo Xiuyao's personality and plans, it was obvious that he planned to hand over the Prince Ding mansion to Xiao Bao as soon as possible, while he himself lived a carefree life. In order to prevent a certain someone from suddenly leaving and causing Xiao Bao to panic, starting to train Xiao Bao now was the right choice. Li, don't worry, Xiao Bao is also my son. Until Yili worried about Xiao Bao's safety, Imo Xiuyao softly comforted her. He was helpless towards Yili's excessive worry. No matter how much of a bastard Xiao Bao was, he was still his son. As a father, he would not kill his own son. Could it be that he treated Xiao Bao too badly, causing Li to be so worried? It was rare for Prince Ding to have a guilty conscience. Yili faintly smiled and said, I know, but I can't help but worry. You know. Sometimes rationality and emotions are two different things. Not to mention that Imo Xiao Bao was still a 10-year-old child, even if he became the world's #1 expert like Imo Xiuyao, as a mother, she still had to worry. Since you already have a plan, you can do as you see fit. I will take good care of Lin and Xan. If Imo Jingli really went crazy, Xiao Bao would not be the only one in danger. Lin and Xan would also be in danger. I promise that Xiao Bao will be safe. Imo Xiuyao solemnly promised. I know. Yili nodded with a faint smile. Reporting to Prince Consort, something has happened. Outside the door, Qin Feng rushed in with an ugly expression. Yili stood up, what's wrong? Qin Feng had always been a steady person. If it wasn't something big, he definitely would not be so impulsive as to break into the study. Qin Feng said in a deep voice, the Queen of Nanzhao was attacked not far from Glass City. The Queen and Little Prince are missing. Chapter 1064. What? Not only Yili, but even Imo Xiuyao's face revealed a trace of surprise. Imo Xiuyao thought for a moment and frowned. Why would the Queen of Nanzhao bring the prince to Glass City? Last year, Princess Anqi gave birth to a little prince in the Central Plains. Yili and Imo Xiuyao were not in Glass City at that time. The child was only half a year old now. Even if the Queen of Nanzhao came to Glass City to congratulate them, she would not bring the little prince because of the long journey. Qin Feng said, Princess Anqi and her husband did not return to the country after leaving Glass City last year. They continued to travel in the Central Plains. They were planning to return to the country, but when they heard that the Prince Ding mansion was holding a birthday banquet for the little prince and princess, they returned with the little prince. They did not expect that they would be assassinated by a group of unknown people less than 100 li from Glass City. Her husband was seriously injured and the whereabouts of the queen and the little prince are unknown. Where is Her Highness? Let him in, Yili said hurriedly. Soon, Pu'er, the king of Nanzhao, walked in. As expected, his luxurious blue Nanjiang clothes were stained with blood. Pu'er's arms and face were also injured. It was obvious that he had been through a fierce battle. Prince Ding, Princess Ding. Because Princess Anqi and Yili had a good relationship, Pu'er was also familiar with Mo Xiaoyao and Yili. He did not stand on ceremony and said anxiously, Prince Ding, Princess, please save Anqi and the child. As he spoke, he bowed in front of Mo Xiaoyao and Yili. The men of Nanjiang were very proud and would not kneel to others easily. The disappearance of his wife and son had already made this man panic. Mo Xiaoyao hurriedly reached out to support him and said in a low voice, Pu'er, don't worry. As long as the Queen of Nanzhao is still in the northwest, I guarantee that I will be able to find her. The Prince Ding mansion will also give Nanzhao an explanation for this matter. Mo Xiaoyao had a natural ability to calm people's hearts and make them trust him. Hearing Prince Ding's words, Pu'er quickly calmed down. He took a deep breath and said, if there's anything I can help you with, please let me know, Prince Ding. As long as Anqi and the child can come back safely. Mo Xiaoyao patted him on the shoulder and said, sit down first and tell I and Wangfei what happened. Then go to the guest room and have a good rest. You're also badly injured. Pu'er nodded heavily. After sorting out his thoughts, he told him about the assassination attempt. It turned out that in the past 6 months, Princess Anqi and Pu'er had been traveling around with their children. In the past 6 months, the 3 forces of the Central Plains had been fighting. Princess Anqi accepted Yili's and Mo Xiaoyao's advice and did not get involved. After a while, Leng Haoyu sighed in a low voice, I only hope that Mo Jingli will not harm Princess Anqi for the time being if he wants to negotiate with us. Otherwise, if the Queen of Nanzhao and the only prince died in Glass City, it would not be good for the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and Nanzhao. Let's do our best to send people to search everywhere. Feng Zhiyao's voice was serious. Yili nodded and said, send out the order. We must be careful. We must ensure the safety of Princess Anqi and the little prince. Han Mingyue said, Princess Anqi is not an ordinary person. Mo Jingli is walking around Glass City with such a woman and a child not even half a year old. It is impossible for him to not give himself away. Princess, there is no need to be too anxious. Yili thought for a moment, then said, then, I will leave this matter to Master Mingyue. Han Mingyue was once the head of the largest intelligence organization in Dechu State. He should be more experienced than others in finding people. Han Mingyue cupped his hands and said with a smile, I will not disappoint Princess. Yili sighed softly and said, thank you for your trouble, Master. In a cave somewhere outside Glass City, Princess Anqi woke up from her slumber. She rubbed her aching forehead and a sharp glint flashed across her eyes. She immediately regained her consciousness and looked around. Are you looking for him? A man's voice came from not far away. It carried a bit of malice and mockery. Princess Anqi looked in the direction of the voice and saw a man with a thick beard dressed in coarse clothes standing not far away. He was holding a baby in swaddling clothes. He was not familiar with the way he held the baby and did not care. He only held the swaddling clothes casually with one hand. Fortunately, the baby was already asleep, so he was not worried. Who are you? Princess Anqi stared warily at the man in front of her. He looked familiar, but when Princess Anqi thought about it seriously, she realized that she did not remember such a person. The man seemed to be stunned for a moment before he sneered, "The Queen of Nanzhao is really forgetful. We remember that the last time we met was not long ago." Chapter 1065. Me. This was a term used by the emperors of the Central Plains. Princess Anqi was stunned. She took a closer look and said hesitantly, "You are Mo Jingli." Princess Anqi couldn't be blamed for not recognizing him. She had never seen Mo Jingli before. Besides, the man in front of her had nothing but height. He definitely looked like the arrogant and sinister kingly of Dechu State. His originally handsome face had become sallow and emaciated. His eyes were filled with ruthlessness and faintly twisted madness. There was also that strange beard that made him look like the king of a bandit stronghold. No one would doubt him if he said he was a bandit from some mountain. Mo Jingli looked at Princess Anqi and laughed loudly. "That's right. I am Mo Jingli. I didn't expect the Queen of Nanzhao to still remember me." Princess Anqi looked at the child in his hand with trepidation. Because of his crazy size, the sleeping child began to struggle. He was about to wake up. "Give me the child first," Princess Anqi said after calming herself down. "Child. Why should I listen to you?" Mo Jingli looked at Princess Anqi condescendingly. Princess Anqi said in a low voice, "Shuo is still young. He doesn't understand adults. He will definitely cry when he wakes up. You don't want his cries to attract the people from the Prince Ding mansion, do you?" Sure enough, before Princess Anqi finished speaking, the child pouted and began to sob. He was about to burst into tears. Mo Jingli was most annoyed by these crying noises during his days on the run. He said angrily, "Shut up. How could a half-year-old baby understand his warning?" Immediately, he burst into tears. Mo Jingli glared fiercely at Princess Anqi and raised his hand to throw the child away. Princess Anqi jumped in fright and hurriedly leaped up to catch the child in midair. When she landed on the ground, Princess Anqi patted the child gently, still in shock. Shuo, be good. Don't cry, make him shut up immediately. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." Mo Jingli ordered coldly. Princess Anqi glanced sideways at Mo Jingli and didn't answer. She just coaxed the child in her arms softly. In his mother's arms, the child's cries quieted down after a short while. He slowly sobbed and fell asleep. After the baby fell asleep, Princess Anqi carefully found a flat and dry place to put the baby down. She even sprinkled some repellent around the baby. As a person from the southern wilderness, he had no lack of these things. After settling the child, Princess Anqi walked to Mo Jingli, who was standing at the entrance of the cave, and asked calmly, "Why did Emperor Chu bring I here?" Mo Jingli looked at Princess Anqi maliciously and sneered, "What do you want? Can't we catch you for no reason?" Princess Anqi shook her head and said, "I don't believe it. If it wasn't for anything, Emperor Chu could have killed I from the beginning. Why wait until now? Is it for the Prince Ding mansion?" It wasn't hard to guess. Although Mo Jingli was deposed by the Empress Dowager and the officials of Dechu State, it was because of the war with the Prince Ding mansion. If he hadn't been defeated by the Prince Ding mansion, the officials of Dechu State wouldn't have dared to rebel against Mo Jingli in Jiangnan. Mo Jingli stared at her and said, "You're smart. No wonder Shu Manlin couldn't beat you. Unfortunately, no matter how smart you are, it's useless in my hands. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for coming to Li City." Princess Anqi didn't speak anymore. With her intelligence, she could see that Mo Jingli wasn't normal. If Mo Jingli was determined to kill her, it was useless to say anything. As the Queen of Nanzhao, she wouldn't kneel and beg for mercy. But Princess Anqi's calmness angered Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli stared at her and laughed sinisterly. Do you think your husband will come to save you? Yes, he escaped, but do you think the people of the Prince Ding mansion can find you? Even if they can find you, this child isn't even a year old yet, right? Can he hold on until then? Princess Anqi said calmly, what do you want? Mo Jingli smiled and said, nothing. I just want to see how powerful the Prince Ding mansion is. Princess Anqi closed her eyes and was silent for a long time. Then she said, you captured me to distract the Prince Ding mansion. You want to do something else, you want to harm the people of the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Jingli tilted his head and looked at Princess Anqi for a long time. Then he sighed and said, you're really a smart woman. You're much better than that idiot Shi Xia. Back then, why did I fall for that idiot? Princess Anqi gritted her teeth, anger flashing through her eyes. When Princess Shi Xia was sent back to Li City by Yi Li's men, her injuries hadn't healed yet. Not to mention, she looked like a 7 or 8-year-old child. Although she was very angry at her disobedient sister, Princess Anqi couldn't help but hate Mo Jingli's heartlessness when she saw how she was hurt by the man she had loved for more than 10 years. Since you already know, then stay here obediently. Maybe if I'm in a good mood, I'll let you go. If you don't, I promise I'll let you watch your precious son die a horrible death. Mo Jingli looked down at Princess Anqi and smiled coldly. As if he thought of something, a trace of hostility flashed through Mo Jingli's eyes. He smiled and said, I know the people of the Prince Ding mansion are looking for us. But, don't worry, they won't find us here. Even if they do, they won't dare to come unless they don't want your life anymore. By the way, if you want to escape, you can go out and try. With that, Mo Jingli ignored Princess Anqi and swaggered out of the cave. Seeing Mo Jingli's figure disappear into the cave, Princess Anqi slowly moved to the entrance of the cave. Soon, she understood why Mo Jingli wasn't afraid that she would escape or that the people of the Prince Ding mansion would find them. This cave was actually halfway up a cliff, and at the bottom of the cliff was a vast and almost endless lake. If she was alone, she could take a gamble and jump directly from the cliff, but with a child, she really couldn't escape by herself. She silently looked at the lake below the cliff. She wasn't very familiar with the northwest and couldn't guess where she was. After thinking for a while, Princess Anqi turned and walked back into the cave. Chapter 1066. The news of the Queen of Nanzhao disappearing not far from Glass City was not completely concealed, and the Prince Ding mansion did not deliberately hide it. Just as Mo Shuyo said, there was no wall in the world that did not have a crack. Right now, the people in Glass City were all nobles and even people in charge of various countries. They more or less had their own secret channels. Even if they could not find out the situation in the Prince Ding mansion, some of the big and small matters in Glass City could not be hidden from them. Among them, the most shocked was Mo Jingyu. He originally thought that Mo Jingli was just joking when he said that he wanted to make a move on the Queen of Nanzhao. He did not expect that madman to really make a move and even succeed. Decades of cautiousness made Mo Jingyu instinctively feel that his current situation was somewhat dangerous. However, such an important piece of evidence and the temptation of the Imperial Jade Seal made him unable to retreat safely. Hearing the news reported by his subordinate, Mo Jingyu took a deep breath. After a while, he regained his senses and waved his hand to dismiss the subordinate. Uncle Wang, did something happen? Mo Suiyun, who was sitting at the side, asked curiously. Mo Jingyu glanced at him indifferently and said, Didn't you hear that someone kidnapped the Queen and Prince of Nanzhao? He blinked and said with some confusion, Why would they kidnap the Queen and Prince of Nanzhao? This is the territory of the Prince Ding Mansion. If they have a grudge against the Queen of Nanzhao, wouldn't it be better to help people elsewhere? Mo Jingyu looked at him and said with a smile, Your Majesty is thinking too much. Mo Suiyun lowered his head and said somewhat shyly, Didn't Uncle Wang and Imperial Grandmother say, we can't provoke the Prince Ding Mansion? Uncle Prince Ding seems to be very powerful. Are those assassins not afraid of him? Mo Jingyu sighed softly and murmured in a low voice, Maybe he's crazy. Although his voice was low, Mo Suiyun was sitting very close to him. Naturally, he heard it clearly. Mo Suiyun lowered his head and did not reply, as if he did not hear Mo Jingyu's words at all. A strange light flashed through his seemingly ignorant eyes. Even though the shadow guards of the Prince Ding Mansion had searched every nook and cranny of Glass City, they still couldn't find Princess Anxi. After that, Su Qingbai and the envoys from the western region arrived at Glass City safely. Since they were escorted by the shadow guards of the Prince Ding Mansion from afar, they did not encounter any trouble along the way. However, a few of the shadow guards sent by the Prince Ding Mansion were injured. In the study of the Prince Ding Mansion, Su Qingbai was drinking tea as he looked at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li, who were sitting at the top of the table. He asked, Did something happen? Even if the emissaries from the western regions were guests, there was no need to send the shadow guard to welcome them hundreds of miles away. After a few years of being independent, Su Qingbai also became more mature and steady. Even though he was too young compared to the officials of the Prince Ding Mansion, his aura was already somewhat similar to that of great teacher Su. Yi Li nodded and told him about Princess Anxi's disappearance. Su Qingbai raised his eyebrows, but did not show any surprise. After thinking for a while, he said, even if Mo Jingli wanted to vent his anger, he wouldn't look for the Queen of Nanzhao, who has no grudge with him. With his personality, I'm afraid, he'll look for the Prince Ding Mansion in the end. Yi Li nodded. She naturally understood what Su Qingbai was saying. She sighed with some worry and said, I'm just afraid that Mo Jingli is deliberately trying to embarrass the Prince Ding Mansion and harm Princess Anxi and the little prince. There hasn't been any news in the past 2 days, so it shouldn't be. Moreover, Mo Jingli is not someone who doesn't care about his own life. With Princess Anxi and the little prince in his hands, at least we won't attack him. Therefore, Princess Anxi shouldn't be in any danger for the time being. Su Qingbai analyzed calmly. He had no relationship with Princess Anxi. It could even be said that he didn't know her at all. Therefore, he was more objective in his analysis. Don't worry too much. If Mo Jingli wanted to kill her, he could have done it on the spot. Why would he bother to kidnap her and find a place to hide her? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and smiled. I also said the same thing, but Li insisted on worrying. Now that Qingbai also thinks so, you should be relieved, right? Yi Li smiled a little embarrassedly and said to Su Qingbai, Fourth brother, second brother will be in charge of the accommodation and reception of the Western Region ambassadors. Please take care of them. Also, I'm a little worried that Mo Jingli might do something to the Western Region ambassadors. If there's any problem, you can go to Qin Feng or Zhuijing. Su Qingbai nodded solemnly. The Western Region ambassadors came from afar to congratulate them. No matter what their intentions were, they were still guests from afar. If something happened to them in Glass City, it would be difficult to explain. If they weren't careful, the Western Region borders might be lit again. Since we're sure it's Mo Jingli, then, could he be in contact with the people from the Chu state? Su Qingbai thought for a moment, then put down the teacup in his hand and asked. Yi Li smiled faintly. Fourth brother is indeed sharp. We do suspect that Mo Jingli has met with Mo Jingyu. I'm afraid Mo Jingli has something on Mo Jingyu. So, you plan to wait for him to come? Su Qingbai raised his eyebrows. But we still have to be careful. Mo Jingli dares to sneak into Xiling and hasn't been caught by the Prince Ding Mansion's shadow guards. It seems that he still has some trump cards. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "Don't worry, this king knows what else he has in his hands." Mo Jingyu has always been cautious. What could Mo Jingli have on him? Speaking of this, Su Qingbai was also curious. He had been in the Chu capital for a period of time, and had even been an official of the Chu state. Naturally, the princes of the Chu state had some understanding of these people. Mo Jingqi was able to remain safe and sound under someone as suspicious as Mo Jingli. Later, when he was under Mo Jingli, he was still able to be put in an important position. Now that Mo Jingli had fallen, he was still able to hold great power. It was clear that he wasn't someone easy to deal with. What weakness could Mo Jingli have against such a person that he could use to control him? Mo Xiaoyao frowned. With Mo Jingyu's current position, no one can touch him even if they have something on him. What can make him afraid of treason, rebellion, regicide? Mo Jingqi and Mo Suyun's matter has nothing to do with him. Rebellion. Mo Jingyu isn't such an impulsive person. He doesn't have any troops in his hands. That means treason. As he spoke, Mo Xiaoyao's brows furrowed. Treason. Yi Li and Su Qingbai were both surprised. Mo Jingyu was a prince of the Chu state. Treason was even more surprising than rebellion and regicide. Mo Xiaoyao rubbed his forehead, thinking as he said, "It shouldn't be considered treason. It's very likely that he sold something from the Chu state to you." He frowned and thought for a moment, before slowly spitting out two words. Northern tribes. Are you sure? Yi Li frowned. Traitors, no matter what era they were in, would always be despised by the world. If that was the case, it was no wonder that Mo Jingli was controlled by him. I'm not sure. It's just a guess, Mo Xiaoyao said mildly. However, whether it's true or not, we'll know soon enough. After knowing that Mo Jingli and Mo Jingyu had been in contact, the Prince Ding Mansion had already sent people to investigate Mo Jingyu. Most likely, it wouldn't be long before all of Mo Jingyu's deeds would be placed before them. If even Mo Jingli could discover a secret, it was fine if the Prince Ding Mansion didn't notice. If they investigated seriously, it was impossible for them not to find out. Yi Li only hoped that this wasn't true. If Mo Jingyu really did something he shouldn't have done, she was afraid that no matter what he did, he wouldn't be able to leave Glass City alive. Chapter 1067. Princess Consort, Princess Helan of the Northern Territory has arrived. A guard reported from outside the door. Hearing this, Yi Li couldn't help but smile. Yi Li had a good impression of the princess of the Northern Territory who dared to love and hate. She stood up and said to Mo Xiaoyao, "I will go and welcome Princess Helan." Even though Princess Helan had the title of princess, the Northern Territory couldn't be considered a country yet. It could only be considered a tribe. As Prince Ding, Mo Xiaoyao naturally didn't need to personally welcome this princess, even if this princess could be the future ruler of the Northern Territory. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "That's fine. I still have some things to discuss with Qingbai." Yi Li didn't beat around the bush. She stood up and walked out. There was a brief moment of silence in the study because of Yi Li's departure. After a while, Mo Xiaoyao finally said, "Qingbai, what do you have to say?" Su Qingbai nodded slightly and said, "I heard, the officials of Li City have some complaints about Li. Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but smile. "Fourth young master Su, it's not like you haven't dealt with those old scholars before. How can you not understand?" Su Qingbai lowered his eyes and nodded. "That is indeed the case." "Then, what does Prince think?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled with satisfaction. This matter will have to depend on fourth young master Su. I understand. Su Qingbai nodded. The smile on Mo Xiaoyao's face became even more joyful. It was so comfortable to talk to smart people. Fourth young master Su looked like he was skilled in politics and was cultured and refined. In reality, he was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. If it wasn't for the absolute power in his personality, with Su Qingbai's scholarly appearance, how could he have subdued the great families of Xiling in a short 2 to 3 years? Although Su Qingchen was the leader of the 5 young masters of the Su family, Mo Xiaoyao knew that eldest young master Su was too aloof. It would be difficult for him to stay in the government for long. Therefore, if she really wanted to do something, she would have to turn to the 4th son of the Su family. As for how those annoying old fellows would be tormented by 4th young master Su, His Highness Prince Ding didn't care. It would be a big mistake to think that Prince Ding was punishing him for his petty actions. The name Prince Ding could also mean petty, vengeful, and vindictive. Helan. Outside the entrance of the Prince Ding mansion, Yili smiled as she looked at the beautiful lady in red who was dressed in the Northern Tribe's unique uniform. Princess Ding. Princess Helan rushed forward with a bright smile and gave Yili a warm hug. Princess Ding, long time no see. You're still so beautiful. Yili helplessly returned the hug and said with a smile, I'm not as beautiful as the princess. After staying in this era for so long, Yili realized that she was not used to such a warm greeting. Really? Princess Helan looked at Yili with joy. Many people praised her beauty, but what kind of praise was more pleasing than praise from the beauty in one's eyes? Yili smiled and said, of course it's true. It seems that the princess has had a great time in the past year. Princess Helan smiled and said, not bad. Although the Central Plains is great, I still prefer the North. I've heard that you've had a wonderful year. One day, I really want to compete with you in martial arts. Along the way, the people of the Central Plains have been talking about Princess Ding as if she's a living goddess of war. You're most welcome. Yili smiled and said, the princess has had a great journey, please come in and rest. Please come in. Princess Helan did not stand on ceremony. She took Yili's hand and walked into the Prince Ding mansion. When they reached the entrance, Yili suddenly stopped and looked at a certain place outside the mansion. Princess Helan was puzzled and asked, what's wrong? Yili smiled faintly and said, nothing, please. At an inconspicuous place, she raised her hand and gestured to Qin Feng. She clearly felt that someone was staring at her from that direction. Qin Feng nodded slightly and watched the two of them enter the Prince Ding mansion. Then, he waved his hand and ordered the guards to search in the direction Yili pointed. In the prince's mansion, Princess Helan held Yili's hand and walked inside. She whispered, Princess Ding, is there something going against the Prince Ding mansion? Yili raised her eyebrows in surprise. She didn't expect Princess Helan's senses to be so sharp. Princess Helan quickly shook her head and said, no, we encountered a group of assassins on the way here. It was before we entered Feihong Pass. At first, I thought it was the remnants of Ren Qining's subordinates who wanted to take revenge on me. Later, I felt that it wasn't so. As soon as we arrived at Glass City, I heard that assassins kidnapped the Queen of Nanzhao. Just now. Princess Helan didn't find anything just now. She just guessed that Yili might have found something from Yili's reaction. Thinking of this, Princess Helan dejectedly admitted that she was indeed inferior to Princess Ding. Yili let out a soft sigh and briefly explained the situation to him. Princess Helan didn't care. She smiled and said, this Mo Jingli is quite bold. If there is a chance, this princess would like to meet him. Yili shook her head helplessly and said with a smile, I don't want you to meet him. Mo Jingli was able to set up an ambush to assassinate Princess Helan on the way here. It could be seen that he was really crazy. He didn't care that he might become the target of the various countries. In Glass City, in a dark alley, a middle-aged man wearing plain cotton clothes slowly raised his head. His eyes flashed with a sharp light. As expected of Yili, she was almost discovered. Thinking of the gentle woman in white with a sweet smile outside the Prince Ding mansion, a complicated expression flashed across the middle-aged man's face. After a moment, he seemed to have thought of something. His face became sinister and twisted. Yili, Mo Xiaoyao. I won't let you off. I won't let you off. In the Dechu State's messenger's hostel, Mo Jingyu pushed open the door to his room with a gloomy face. Just now, he heard that Princess Helan's group in the north had encountered an assassination attempt. He didn't need to think to know who did it. Now that the Prince Ding mansion was at its peak, there was no one who dared to go against the Prince Ding mansion other than that crazy Mo Jingli. As soon as he entered, he realized that something was wrong. Mo Jingyu raised his head in alarm and saw a person sitting on the soft couch in his room, reading a book. Mo Jingyu was stunned. He quickly turned around and closed the door. In a low voice, he roared, "You're crazy. You actually dare to swagger in here at a time like this?" Mo Jingli sneered. He raised his eyebrows in disdain. "Are you afraid? Don't worry, the people from the Prince Ding mansion won't discover me." Mo Jingyu looked carefully and realized that most of Mo Jingli's appearance was very different from last time. His originally eye-catching beard had been completely replaced, and his originally sallow and thin face was also a little too fair. He was even wearing the clothes of a guard from the Dechu State's Prince Yu's residence. He didn't look like a middle-aged man in his 30s. Instead, he looked like a sickly young man in his 20s. "You." Mo Jingyu walked up and stared at Mo Jingli. When he got closer, he realized that Mo Jingli's face was unnaturally white. It turned out that he had applied a layer of powder. Mo Jingli hadn't been living well these days. It wasn't possible for him to return to his original pampered appearance in a short period of time. Naturally, he could only use powder to cover it up. But as a man, even though Mo Jingyu was a member of the imperial family and liked to pretend to be cultured, he still couldn't stand the powder on his face. He couldn't help but frown. "You're really unscrupulous." If one wasn't familiar with Mo Jingli, they might not be able to recognize him even if he stood in front of them. No wonder Mo Jingli was so fearless. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.